Chapter 727. Hearing Yang Ruping and Aunt Qin talking about her second brother. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but stop. Aunt Qin said apologetically, "Hall Master, I'm not too familiar with Zhang Xiaohu. You also know that he joined the Misty Heights before the Misty School was destroyed. It was Master O's sister who recommended him. His background should be clean, otherwise Wen Hai wouldn't have taught him wholeheartedly. It's just that." She wanted to say something, but stopped. Yang Ruping also smiled bitterly and said, "It seems that Deputy Hall Master Qin has the same concerns as me. Zhang Xiaohu doesn't have the ethereal divine art now. If he practices it again, it will be the cultivation method of the incense cult. Hall Master Qin doesn't know about the Suhuan mantra, but I know it very well. It's also a famous mantra of the incense cult. It's a big deal for sect leader to win over Zhang Xiaohu. He may not. Alas, it's more than may not, it's almost certain. Sect leader has decreed that Zhang Xiaohu must practice it. Since he has practiced the Suhuan mantra, he can't practice the ethereal divine art anymore. This Zhang Xiaohu is a direct disciple of the Misty School, but his internal strength is the mantra of the incense cult. It's a great irony." Aunt Qin's brows also furrowed as she said, "That's right. It wasn't easy to send Zhong Pei away. Not only is there a new vice hall master coming in, I don't know what his character is like. This direct disciple who was originally quite pleasing to the eye was instantly roped in. However, sect leader is too blatant. Although Zhang Xiaohu is a direct disciple, but his martial arts can't catch up with Chang'e. Even Chen Chen is a little inferior. The 4 carriages of licorice roots, saving the disciples of the Tuoden Hall, and Xia Zai should be credited to Chang'e. But why did sect leader only reward Zhang Xiaohu, while Chang'e and Chen Chen didn't get anything?" Yang Ruping giggled and said, "Vice Hall Master Qin, you also know to cry out for your disciple? Unfortunately, women are born to favor outsiders. Didn't you hear Chang'e and Chen Chen say at the same time that it was Zhang Xiaohu's credit that they didn't contribute at all? Alas." Hearing this, Aunt Qin sighed even more. "That's right. It's normal for Chang'e to say this. Chen Chen actually said the same thing. Is it because she grew up with Chang'e? However, looking at Lingering Fragrance Peak, Chen Chen's attitude toward Chen Chen today, it's not without reason. Maybe it's the arrangement of Sir Sect Master. Aunt Qin asked curiously, "If that's the case, only Chang'e didn't get the reward. Then why? Lord Hierarch's wisdom is as vast as the sea. How can we know? If we don't reward him, what can we as his disciples say?" Aunt Qin probed again. "Hall Master, could it be that Zhang Xiaohu can only practice the Suhuan mental cultivation method and can't practice the ethereal divine skill? If he can practice both, then our Misty School can be considered to have some relationship with him." Yang Ruping shook her head silently and said, "This Suhuan mental cultivation method is very wonderful. The disciples who practice it all have deep internal strength, and it lasts for a long time. No matter what kind of martial arts they use it to perform, they get twice the result with half the effort. Even the ethereal divine skill can't compare to it. Therefore, even if Zhang Xiaohu doesn't practice the ethereal divine skill, he can still use the Suhuan mental cultivation method to perform the martial arts of the Misty School. The Suhuan mental cultivation method is extremely soft and can't be mixed with the ethereal divine skill at all. Not to mention the genius of Jianghu. Even the inner disciples of Lingering Fragrance Peak can't do it." Back then, Lingering Fragrance Peak also had an inner disciple with outstanding talent who wanted to walk the path of yin and yang dual cultivation. Unfortunately, it went smoothly at first, but when it reached the middle stage, there was no progress no matter what. After a few years, he suffered from Qigong deviation and died. From then on, no disciple of Lingering Fragrance Peak took this path. However, Yang Ruping frowned and said with a smile, "There's a legend in Lingering Fragrance Peak that there is an immortal pill that can harmonize yin and yang. allowing the Suhuan mental cultivation method to be practiced together with other martial arts. The name of this immortal pill hasn't been passed down, so us inner disciples don't know about it. How can you believe the things in legends? Aunt Chin said with a smile. However, there are many legends in your lingering Fragrance Peak. We've been at Shershin Peak for many years and have heard many of these magical stories. Yang Ruping hesitated for a moment. Actually, they might not all be fake. Aunt Chin didn't think so and said with a smile, if that's the case, then we have to be prepared for Zhang Xiaohu's betrayal. He changed his path halfway, and his aptitude seems to be good. However, he also missed the best opportunity to practice internal strength. I reckon that the ethereal divine skill will also be abandoned by him. And that's right. There's no need to talk about this. Moreover, he's using the Suhuan mental cultivation method to help him practice the Suhuan mental cultivation method. Although he can quickly get started, his foundation isn't solid enough. It's impossible for his mental cultivation method to reach perfection, and he can't practice other martial arts. Then the two stopped talking about Zhang Xiaohu and talked about the matters in the hall. Zhang Xiaohua saw that there was nothing he was interested in and was about to leave when he heard Aunt Chin talking to Yang Ruping. That's right, that Rin Xiaoyao from the pill expansion hall today. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and said inwardly it's really worth it to come here. Let's see if Aunt Chin has discovered anything. He had a good impression of Aunt Chin. After all, she had helped him in Huanxi Mountain Manor. Alas, the people from the pill expansion hall came. Shuyu Hall and Qianquan Hall will probably send people here soon. Why can't our Misty Hall's disciples be fine? Yang Ruping didn't seem to understand the meaning of Aunt Chin's words and complained. As a hall master, I'm also annoyed. It's just that there's no one in the Misty Hall who can replace me. I can't just watch my husband's old subordinates be broken up by Sir Hierarch. That's why I'm holding on, Aunt Chin heard and sighed. Hall master, you've worked hard. Then, she didn't mention Zhang Xiaohua again. Zhang Xiaohua hid in the dark and thought while rubbing his chin, I guess Aunt Chin wants to tell Hall master about me. She might already be suspicious. After all, my appearance hasn't changed much. But in the end, she didn't say anything. I guess there's still some estrangement between us. And Aunt Chin seems to be partial to the Misty School. That's not bad. Presumably, Zhang Xiaohua didn't have the patience to listen to the two discussing the affairs of the hall. She cast a spell and escaped. Then, she searched several places in the dark, but didn't find any trace of Zhang Xiaohu. Even when she eavesdropped on some disciples, they only talked about the heartless man during the day. They didn't mention Zhang Xiaohu, let alone his residence. Seeing that it was getting late, Zhang Xiaohua didn't have time to search anymore and was about to return to her residence. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly realized something and slapped her forehead. Oh, it seems that I've been so used to being a thief that I forgot that Zhang Xiaohu is Ren Xiaoyao's savior. I should just go and thank him openly. Why do I have to be so sneaky? Shaking her head with a smile, Zhang Xiaohua returned to her residence. After a quiet night, when she woke up the next day, Zhang Xiaohua was still practicing the Fist of the North Star. Only then did she find that the Fist of the North Star had advanced to the second level. There were a total of 12 flows to temper the bones of the whole body. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. It seemed that the comprehension of the heavenly Tao was really useful. Even the bone tempering could improve. Seeing that the sky was bright, Zhang Xiaohua walked out of her residence and carefully observed the surrounding environment. The small courtyard of the pill-expanding hall was extremely remote. There were no residences of the Misty Hall around it, only a medicinal field. It must have been set up by the Misty Hall to isolate the disciples on duty of the pill-expanding hall. In her mind, Zhang Xiaohua found that the qi of heaven and earth in the Shershin Peak was indeed somewhat different from that of the Tianmu Peak. No wonder the Shershin Peak was the richest peak in the pill-expanding hall. The Shershin Peak was extremely high. Zhang Xiaohua visually estimated the peak and felt that it was much higher than the Tianmu Peak. Most of the houses of the Misty Hall were also on the mountainside. However, there were not many flat places on the mountainside. Most of the time, the mountain rocks also blocked many courtyards. While she was looking, she saw a young disciple coming from afar. It was the disciple Du Feng who had sent Zhang Xiaohua here yesterday. Thinking that he was quite enthusiastic yesterday, Zhang Xiaohua went forward to greet him and cupped her hands, saying, "Senior Du woke up very early." Du Feng returned the greeting and said with a smile, "It's nothing, it's nothing. We martial artists are most particular about gathering qi. The rising sun is also a great opportunity to temper the internal qi. How can we miss it? Junior brother Rin, why did you also wake up so early?" In the past, the disciples on duty of the pill-expanding hall would only wake up late in the morning. Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile, "I've also learned a little bit of martial arts. Master also told me to practice more." Du Feng was stunned and then understood. He said with a smile, "I was wondering why the pill-expanding hall sent junior brother in here. So that's why." Zhang Xiaohua saw that Du Feng was so straightforward and unconsciously had a good impression of him. She said, "Senior brother Du, do you also want to test my martial arts?" Du Feng heard her words and waved his hand, saying, "Forget it. Yesterday, Master Yang had told me not to embarrass you. If I fight with you, won't I be looking for trouble? Well, senior brother has become a brother. I don't know if it's really straightforward or for the sake of Chen Qin of the Lingxiang Peak." The purpose of Du Feng's visit was to tell Zhang Xiaohua about the environment and let her know something. They chatted for a while and then talked about the pill-expanding hall. Yao had told them about these things on the way to the Shixin Peak. Zhang Xiaohua just learned about it from Du Feng, and it didn't take long for them to finish. Therefore, Du Feng smiled and said, "Junior brother Rin is indeed smart. You understood what I said. You disciples on duty don't have anything to do. We don't have a good relationship with the previous disciples, so there's no need to mention it. If you are willing, you can look for me if you have any problems." Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed and said with a smile, "Thank you, senior brother Du, I'll definitely come to you for help." Then she asked about Du Feng's residence. Then she said with a smile, "By the way, senior brother Du, where does Zhang Xiaohu live? This little brother is indebted to him for saving my life. Seeing that he was seriously injured yesterday, this little brother still wants to take a look." -3. Chapter 728. Zhang Xiaohu. Du Feng nodded. "He is a direct disciple of our Misty School and doesn't live with us. I can tell you where he lives, but," Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously, "is it inconvenient for me to visit him?" Du Feng smiled bitterly. "I'm afraid so." He then explained, "In the past, the disciples on duty of the pill-expanding hall lived around here and in the herb field at Shixin Peak. We rarely visit our residence. I invited you because junior brother Ran and I are on good terms. Moreover, we are both disciples of the fragrant religion and there is no harm in chatting with him. However, senior brother Rin is a direct disciple of the Misty School. I don't know if it is convenient for us to meet." Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, "I wonder if senior brother Du can meet with Hall Master Yang and tell him about this little brother's thoughts. I think it's not a big deal to take a look at our benefactor. Moreover, this little brother came from the Pill Expansion Hall and knows a little about Qi Huang. Helping Zhang Xiaohu take a look can be considered bargain." Du Feng nodded slightly. "That is good. Our Misty Hall is good at everything, but we don't have anyone who knows about Qi Huang. We usually treat our own injuries. However, senior brother Zhang's injuries are a little serious. The hall was worried about him yesterday." He then pulled Zhang Xiaohua's sleeve and said, "Let's go. Junior brother Rin, follow me. I will report to the hall master and see what she decides." Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. He followed Du Feng to the Misty Hall. Zhang Xiaohua didn't go in but waited outside. Du Feng came out not long after he went in. He smiled and said, "Hall master has allowed it. Let's go. In the future, junior brother can go and find senior brother Zhang. Hall master likes to repay kindness." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and followed Du Feng to Zhang Xiaohu's courtyard. Zhang Xiaohu's courtyard wasn't far from Wenwenhai's, but it was in a different direction. When Zhang Xiaohua approached the courtyard, she smelled a medicinal fragrance. Perhaps someone was brewing medicine inside. Du Feng walked to the door and knocked. A woman's voice was heard. "Who is it?" Du Feng was stunned and said respectfully, "Senior Sister Chang'e, it is me." The courtyard door opened and Chang'e's haggard face appeared at the door. She asked softly, "Du Feng? You?" Before she finished her question, she saw Zhang Xiaohua, who was standing at the bottom of the stairs. Her face lit up and smiled. Junior brother Rin, you are here too?" Zhang Xiaohua cupped her hands and said, "Senior Sister Chang'e, I saw that senior brother Zhang was seriously injured yesterday, and I have been thinking about him. Today, I asked senior brother Du to bring me over to take a look at my benefactor's injuries." Du Feng smiled and said, "Junior brother Rin is grateful to senior brother Zhang for saving his life. When we were at the medicinal field, he kept talking about it. I saw that he was impatient and asked for Hall Master Yang's permission. Hall Master Yang also agreed and said that I can come over often to take care of him. I hope that Senior Sister Chang'e can make things convenient for me." Chang'e had been looking forward to Zhang Xiaohua's visit for a long time. How could she say anything more now? However, she still had to say, "Junior brother Rin, I have seen him in the Yulon Grand Canyon. Naturally, I know his character, but forget it. Since Hall Master Yang has agreed, what else do we as disciples have to do? Come in." Du Feng was overjoyed and said, "Thank you, Senior Sister Chang'e." Zhang Xiaohua also cupped her hands and thanked her. This was a small courtyard. After entering, there were 3 connected rooms. Chang'e led the 2 of them into the hall. A young disciple came out holding a bowl of medicine. He frowned and said, "Senior Sister Chang'e, this? Senior brother Zhang will vomit after eating this medicine. What should we do? Should we ask for the Hall Master's order and ask him to come to Lingxiang Peak?" When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she took a step forward and said, "Senior Sister Chang'e, I have studied Qi Huang for a few years. Can you let me take Senior brother Zhang's pulse?" Chang'e pretended to be happy and said, "That's right. Senior Sister Xia's broken bones were fixed by you. How could I forget?" She then said, "Wait for a moment in the outer hall. I will ask Senior brother Zhang." After saying this, she went into the eastern room. After a moment, she poked her head out and said, "Junior brother Du, bring Junior brother Rin in." When Zhang Xiaohua followed Du Feng into the eastern room, she was not in a hurry to see the layout and decorations of the room. Instead, she looked at Zhang Xiaohu, who was lying dispiritedly on the bed under the window. She saw Zhang Xiaohu's pale face. His eyes were sunken and his lips were dry and peeling. He opened his eyes slightly and looked at Zhang Xiaohua. He nodded. Zhang Xiaohua hurried forward and cupped her hands and said, "Benefactor Zhang, you still recognize me, right?" Zhang Xiaohu's mouth revealed a trace of a smile. His eyes were also a bit bright as he nodded slightly. Zhang Xiaohua looked at him with her back facing everyone and said, "I have learned Qi Huang before. Now, I will take Benefactor's pulse and check your injuries." After he finished speaking, he took a few steps to the bed and picked up Zhang Xiaohu's wrist. He carefully felt his pulse. After a long while, he transferred his true energy to Zhang Xiaohu and checked his meridians. Then he frowned and thought for a moment. He smiled and said, "I don't know if Benefactor trusts me. If you trust me, I will write a prescription for you. I wonder if Shixin Peak has the herbs?" When Chang'e saw Zhang Xiaohua's act, a smile appeared on her haggard face. She replied on behalf of Zhang Xiaohu, "Junior brother Rin, feel free to write a prescription. Shixin Peak has a lot of herbs. There are also some Qi Huang herbs that are commonly used." Thus, Zhang Xiaohua walked to the table next to her and picked up the brush on it. She quickly wrote a prescription and handed it to Chang'e. "Senior sister, please find some herbs according to this prescription and boil them for Senior brother Zhang." Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's confident look, Chang'e was also happy. But when she saw the writing on the white paper that looked like a nest of crabs taking a stroll, she couldn't help but laugh. When the two disciples saw it, they couldn't help but laugh. Zhang Xiaohua had to lower her head and count the ants on the ground, pretending that she didn't see anything. Chang'e ordered the disciple to go out and find the herbs. She accompanied Du Feng and Zhang Xiaohua to talk in the hall. Then she heard Zhang Xiaohua ask, "Senior Sister Chang'e, how is your arm?" Chang'e smiled and said, "Junior Brother Ren's bone setting technique is really good. The bone seems to be a little sore and itchy. It should be healed soon." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and secretly said, "It takes 100 days to break a bone and tendon. How can it be healed so quickly?" "However," she said, "it's because Senior Sister Chang'e recovered well. It has nothing to do with my medical skills." Du Feng also chatted with her for a while. Then he stood up and said, "Senior Sister Chang'e, I still have things to do. I will come to see Senior Brother Zhang in the afternoon when I have time. You are injured, so you should rest more. Let the other junior brothers or junior sisters do these things." Chang'e smiled and said, "It doesn't matter. Senior Brother Zhang saved me. I just want to repay him. Junior Brother Rin, I have to go back. Do you want to go with me? Or stay here?" Du Feng turned his head and asked, "I will wait for a while. After the medicine is boiled and Senior Brother Zhang takes it, I will see the effect." Zhang Xiaohua naturally wouldn't leave. Therefore, Du Feng left first. After he left, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Senior Sister Chang'e, am I very talented in singing?" Chang'e smiled and said, "Of course you are. Not only that, but you also have the potential to be a traveling doctor." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and shook her head. She said, "It's not potential. It's real." "No way." This time, it was Chang'e who was surprised. "You can set bones and plant herbs. It's okay, but you really know Qi Huang?" "Oh, Senior Sister Chang'e, you underestimate me. Do you think I only rely on elixirs to set your bones and save Senior Sister Xia? Well, I know you can do it. Don't talk nonsense. Let's go and see Xiaohu." As she said, she looked a little worried, seeing Chang'e like this. Zhang Xiaohua walked to the east room and said, "Don't worry, Senior Sister Chang'e. Second brother is just seriously injured, which affects his body. His meridians and other parts are intact." Although she said so, how could Chang'e rest assured when she saw Zhang Xiaohu was seriously injured? She only accompanied Zhang Xiaohua into the room, but her eyebrows were still frowning. Zhang Xiaohua walked to Zhang Xiaohu's bed again and said with a smile, "Second brother, why are you so embarrassed every time I see you?" Zhang Xiaohu smiled with difficulty and didn't speak. Zhang Xiaohua looked back at Chang'e and said, "Senior Sister Chang'e, I have to check second brother's injuries." "You see," Chang'e didn't understand for a moment and blurted out, "You see, there are no outsiders now." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and secretly gave Zhang Xiaohu a thumbs up with her right hand. Zhang Xiaohu was very helpless and kept blinking. When Zhang Xiaohua lifted Zhang Xiaohu's quilt and took off his clothes, Chang'e understood what Zhang Xiaohua meant. She immediately blushed and ran out. Looking at Chang'e's back, Zhang Xiaohua had an idea. She got close to second brother's ear and said, "Second brother, you don't seem to have any secret marks on your body. If you do, tell me now. I will definitely help you." Zhang Xiaohu's mouth moved a few times. Zhang Xiaohua put her ear close and heard a word, "Bah!" Although Zhang Xiaohua had already felt his pulse and knew his injuries, when she took off Zhang Xiaohu's clothes, she was so distressed that she almost cried. Zhang Xiaohu's whole body was covered with whip marks. Some were scarred, some were suppurated, and some were still oozing blood. Even his clothes were stuck. Zhang Xiaohua forced a smile and said, "Second brother, I don't know if you are afraid of pain. I have to cut off all the rotten flesh on your body." Seeing Zhang Xiaohu nod slightly, Zhang Xiaohua immersed her divine sense into her belt and took out a dozen jade boxes. She took out the herbs inside and said loudly, "Senior Sister Chang'e." Chang'e answered and entered. At a glance, she saw Zhang Xiaohu lying naked on the bed. She was about to scold Zhang Xiaohua, but then she saw the whip marks on Zhang Xiaohu's body. She couldn't help crying and asked, "Xiaohua, what's the matter?" Zhang Xiaohua asked, "Is there a big wooden tub for bathing?" Chang'e was stunned and pointed to a small house in the yard. "There should be some in there, right?" Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, "Well, I'll have to trouble Sister Chang'e to start the fire first. I want to give second brother a bath first." -3. Chapter 729. Take a bath. Chang'e was stunned and asked, "Why do we need to take a bath at this time?" Zhang Xiaohua said, "Second brother's body is full of whip marks. Because of the long time his flesh has rotted. I want to cut off all the flesh. While I'm at it, I also want to wash his body with some medicinal herbs and apply some medicinal pills." "Oh, I know." Chang'e nodded. "What medicinal herbs do you need? Tell me, and I'll go get them." Zhang Xiaohua pointed to the medicinal herbs on the table and said, "I brought all these. You just need to start the fire." Looking at the dazzling array of medicinal herbs on the table, Chang'e was speechless. He didn't know how Zhang Xiaohua managed to get them. He could only smile and said, "No problem. Although my arm is injured, it's not a problem to boil water." After he finished speaking, he turned around and walked to the door without looking back. He said, "Xiaohua, it's better to put your second brother under the quilt. Don't catch a cold." I know." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and turned to look at Zhang Xiaohu. She then covered him with the quilt. At this time, Zhang Xiaohu's pale face had a little bit of color. When Chang'e finished boiling the water, the disciple who went out to get the medicinal herbs came back. He set up a pot outside and started boiling the medicinal herbs. Since a disciple came back and Zhang Xiaohua wanted to wash Zhang Xiaohu's body with medicinal herbs, Chang'e naturally couldn't stay any longer. He gave some instructions and left first. Zhang Xiaohua tested the temperature of the water in the wooden barrel and threw different medicinal herbs inside. Not long after, the strong smell of medicinal herbs filled the small courtyard. It was stronger than the medicinal herbs in the pot. TSK, these are medicinal herbs that are decades old or even hundreds of years old. They're actually boiling water for you to bathe. Second brother, if you have too much kidney fluid in the future, second sister-in-law will blame you. Don't sell me out." Zhang Xiaohua smacked her lips and chattered in Zhang Xiaohu's ear. Zhang Xiaohu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Zhang Xiaohua easily grabbed Zhang Xiaohu's shoulder with one hand and took out Chasing Dream with the other. With a wave of her hand, she wanted to peel off Zhang Xiaohu's body. In half a meal's time, Zhang Xiaohu's entire body was peeled off. All of the rotten flesh was removed, revealing new tender flesh. Second brother, you didn't see Zhao Jian's death by 1,000 cuts yesterday. It's really similar to yours. Say, why didn't he think that he would end up like this when he was torturing you? Oh, that's right. In that case, there are no more hidden marks on your body. This Zhang Xiaohua's thoughts jumped too quickly. Zhang Xiaohu's acupoints were sealed by Zhang Xiaohua, so he couldn't feel any pain. However, he could still feel the small sword cutting his body. Looking at the pieces of rotten flesh being cut off and then looking at Zhang Xiaohua using the small sword to draw on his waist, Zhang Xiaohu couldn't help but sweat. In his heart, he cursed, "You should be more focused. Don't say such useless things. If you make a mistake, even if my kidneys are full, your second sister-in-law won't care about me." After the rotten flesh on Zhang Xiaohu's body was removed, the medicinal soup in the wooden tub was also ready. Zhang Xiaohua lifted her second brother and placed him into the medicinal soup. She smiled and said, "Second brother, I'm going to unseal your acupoints. You must endure the pain. Furthermore, I'm going to put your entire body into the medicinal soup. Hold your breath and only circulate your internal energy. I'll help you absorb the medicinal power in the soup." Zhang Xiaohu nodded. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua placed her second brother into the medicinal soup and transferred her qi to help Zhang Xiaohu circulate his internal energy to absorb the medicinal power. Zhang Xiaohua said it was simple and easy. However, Zhang Xiaohu suffered greatly. When his acupoints were unsealed, the pain in his body was like a tidal wave crashing into his head. The heat of the medicinal soup magnified the pain by several times. If not for his entire body being soaked in water, even if he screamed, it would only be bubbles. Zhang Xiaohu would have already cried out. Fortunately, Zhang Xiaohu was already used to being tortured in the prison. Although the initial pain was unbearable, he slowly got used to it. Furthermore, as he circulated the art of ethereal divination, the pain in his body gradually disappeared. His mind also gradually became clear. It was as if the internal energy flowing through his meridians was the only thing supporting his entire world. After an unknown amount of time, Zhang Xiaohu felt an explosion in his mind. He woke up from an indescribable state. He only felt that his dantian was lively. Before he could circulate his internal energy to check, he was pulled out of the medicinal soup by Zhang Xiaohua. After that, Zhang Xiaohua sent her second brother back to the eastern hut and used the blood coagulation pill to rub his entire body. At this time, the disciples outside the hut had already finished boiling the medicinal soup. There were 2 full bowls. After Zhang Xiaohua finished feeding him the medicine, she smiled and said, "Second brother, I've already done what I should do. You should sleep well. When you wake up, you'll feel much better." Zhang Xiaohu nodded slightly and smiled. He tilted his head and fell into a deep sleep. Zhang Xiaohua left the eastern hut and said goodbye to the disciple in the hall. Then, she returned to the small courtyard of the pill repository hall. At this time, the small courtyard was still as quiet as before. It was as if no one had ever been there. Zhang Xiaohua returned to the hut and set up a restriction around the hut. Then, she sat cross-legged on the praying mat and began to take inventory of her harvest from the Orchid Evening Refinement. Ever since she came out from the Orchid Grand Canyon, she had not been idle. Killing people, treating injuries, and getting promoted were one thing after another. Until today, she finally had some free time. The first thing to be checked was the medicinal herbs in the belt. Those were the hard work of hundreds of disciples from the Pill Repository Hall and the Misty Hall. Now, Zhang Xiaohua had reaped without sowing. There were many jade boxes in the belt. Zhang Xiaohua could not take them out one by one. She could only immerse her divine sense into the space of the belt and take inventory of them one by one. There were many medicinal herbs in the strange birch forest. The varieties were also complicated. The disciples of the Pill Repository Hall's herb department had picked all kinds of strange herbs. Even though Zhang Xiaohua had read the 100 Herbs Compendium, she still did not recognize about 40% of the herbs. The disciples of the Misty Hall had picked some rare herbs. Although there were not many of them, their value was considerable. This not many was only relative to the Pill Repository Hall. Usually, if she only needed 10% of them, Zhang Xiaohua would be so happy that she could not close her mouth. But at this time, she was a little numb. There were also hundreds of bloody wolf tails in the belt, but they were just thrown in a corner of the space. Zhang Xiaohua casually looked at them and did not care. At that time, she had just wanted to see how many points she could get for fun. The real use of it was almost useless. Then Zhang Xiaohua took out a jade box from the money bag and carefully removed the restriction on it. As soon as she opened the lid, a desolate, primitive, unruly, and somewhat cold aura hit her in the face. It was the black and white fruit. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. This unknown black and white fruit was not like this at that time. It was just like a stone. At this time, not only was it quietly suspended in the jade box, but the fruit was also slightly rotating. With the rotation, the aura was emitted wave after wave. But when Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense approached the fruit, it immediately slid away when it reached the surface of the black and white fruit. She could not penetrate it at all. What is this thing? What can it be used for? Zhang Xiaohua stared at the black and white fruit in the jade box. Frowning, he searched the Refining the World and the Compendium of Herbs. Unfortunately, there was not a trace of clues. In the end, he could only put the most powerful restriction he knew on the surface of the black and white fruit. He also put the same restriction on the jade box. Then he carefully put it in the money bag. Then Zhang Xiaohua took out the golden lotus seed. This seed was restricted in the magma, but there was no change. Zhang Xiaohua knew that if he wanted it to grow, it must be placed in the underground magma of a deserted island. Only the qi of heaven and earth there could give birth to the mother-child lotus and the colorful lotus seed. After looking at the other things, Zhang Xiaohua took out Little Black and Little Yellow. These two were not even a month old and were still sleeping soundly. Zhang Xiaohua took them out of his clothes. They seemed to be not used to it. Their little noses twitched a few times, sniffing, and their little heads shook slightly. The two little things were the size of a palm. Zhang Xiaohua held one in each hand. The more he looked at it, the more he liked it. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua thought of the situation when Huan first saw him. His heart skipped a beat. He placed Little Black on the ground and took out the small vitality stone that he usually used for cultivation. He placed it beside Little Yellow. Although Little Yellow was still sleeping, its nose twitched. Its little pink tongue stuck out slightly. It used its head to push against the vitality stone. Its little claws also reached towards the vitality stone. It seemed to like it very much. Zhang Xiaohua placed the vitality stone on the ground and placed Little Black and Little Yellow on the side. The two little things were actually snuggling up to the vitality stone, as if they were enjoying it. Zhang Xiaohua suddenly understood. No wonder these two little things didn't wake up and didn't eat since they were born. It seemed that they also relied on the energy of heaven and earth to survive. They were much more powerful than the four odd beasts. Huan still had to eat grass on a daily basis. Damn, Zhang Xiaohua's comparison. Sigh, the difference was too great. After thinking for a moment, Zhang Xiaohua took out the large vitality stone from his money pouch and dug out 2 holes with great difficulty. He stuffed Little Black and Little Yellow into the holes. Then he wanted to take back the crouching ox stone. However, no matter how he manipulated his divine sense, he couldn't put the stone and the 2 little things into his money pouch. In the end, Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to empty the middle of the 2 primeval stones and put the 2 little things inside before putting them into his bosom. And, fortunately, it wasn't too conspicuous and wouldn't be mistaken as a woman dressed as a man. Perhaps this would allow Little Black and Little Yellow to wake up sooner. Then, Zhang Xiaohua nervously stretched out her left hand and opened it in front of her eyes. The crack on her palm was extremely long and deep. At this moment, it looked like a scar on her left hand that had healed after being cut by a knife. With a thought, the crack opened slightly. In an instant, Zhang Xiaohua seemed to have opened a third eye and looked at herself from another angle. However, when Zhang Xiaohua saw him, she was almost about to pick him up. Come. -3. Chapter 730. Zhang Xiaohua opened the silver eye in his hand as if it was his third eye. However, when he used his divine sense to look through the silver eye, he was so shocked that he almost jumped up from the ground. What Zhang Xiaohua saw was not the handsome and elegant man he had imagined. Cough, not to mention that even the small eyes with the flat nose were gone. What he saw was a blurry crystal skull. The skull was covered with red threads, and there was a golden ball in the skull. It was exactly the same as the essence of herbalism in his mud pill palace. This! Zhang Xiaohua was surprised. What did I see? Zhang Xiaohua raised his hand slightly and looked at the sky again. It was also blurry like chaos. However, he felt that there were layers to it. However, when he looked at it carefully, he could not see anything clearly. In the chaos, there were some things floating around. There were also many small light ribbons that emitted different colors. In short, it was a mess. It was completely different from what he usually saw. When Zhang Xiaohua wanted to look further, a huge wave of fatigue came from his mud pill palace. Zhang Xiaohua quickly closed the silver eye. There was no need to examine it too closely. The divine sense in his mud pill palace had been exhausted, and the vital energy in his meridians had been depleted. What is this silver eye? How can it consume so much divine sense and vital energy? What did I see? Crystal bones? But why are there red threads on the bones? The golden ball should be the essence of herbalism, surrounded by the golden restriction in his mud pill palace. My goodness, I usually feel it with my divine sense. This I can actually see it directly. This is incredible. Moreover, what I see is different from what I see with my naked eyes. A strange thought suddenly popped up in Zhang Xiaohua's mind. Could it be that what the silver eye sees is the real? That what I usually see is just the surface? Delirium! A name popped up in his mind. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked by his own thoughts. He looked at the crack on his left hand in fear. Then he turned his palm. The fist-sized silver ball was actually melted into this flat hand. I really don't know how it was hidden. After studying it for a while, he still could not find anything. However, the name of the silver eye was found by Zhang Xiaohua. Delusion Breaker Magic Eye. It sounded very impressive. Fortunately, the Delusion Breaker Magic Eye was melted into the hand. If it was placed on the forehead like the yellow wind, wouldn't I have to change my name? Zhang Xiaohua's heartbeat thought. However, no matter how powerful the Delusion Breaker Magic Eye was, Zhang Xiaohua's spiritual power was low now. Just looking at it with his eyes would exhaust his divine sense and true qi. He was not able to activate the magic within it, so it was impossible for him to know what kind of magic the Delusion Breaker Magic Eye had. Then Zhang Xiaohua thought of the small ball that the yellow wind left for Blackie in the money bag. Maybe that small ball didn't consume much true qi? Of course, this was just a fleeting thought. That thing was Blackie's inheritance, and he had no intention of taking it away. After checking the harvest of the valley orchid at dusk, Zhang Xiaohua began to cultivate in peace. Now that she had achieved her goal of entering the fragrant religion and was with her second brother and the disciples of the Misty School, the only goal she pursued was to cultivate the way of immortality. Moreover, it was time for her to calm down and cultivate properly. After many days, Zhang Xiaohua lived a peaceful and fulfilling life of cultivation. At first, Dufeng came every day, but later, he slacked off and disappeared without a trace. Zhang Xiaohua, in addition to cultivating, went to change the medicine for her second brother and also took a bath. And, speaking of which, she had to say one more thing. The next day, when she bathed Zhang Xiaohu in the medicinal soup, she saw that some parts of her second brother's body were already scarred. It was very unsightly. Zhang Xiaohua immediately remembered that she still had the stone milk from the cold pond in her money bag. This stone milk was best for removing rotting flesh and whitening the skin. How could she forget? And there was no need to blame Zhang Xiaohua. Anyone who obtained so many good things in the valley would inevitably miss out on some unimportant things. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua added a little bit of heaven stalactite milk into the medicinal soup that Zhang Xiaohu was soaking in. It had to be said that Zhang Xiaohua was a prodigal. What was this heaven stalactite milk? To put it bluntly, it was the great pill bred by the earth. It was an extremely rare great pill. If it was taken with the corresponding cultivation method, it could either be used to cultivate a special magical ability, or it could increase one's cultivation. Perhaps there would be other surprises. Although Zhang Xiaohua didn't know the method to take it, and didn't have the corresponding cultivation method, but she couldn't be so wasteful. Fortunately, Zhang Xiaohua added a little bit of heaven stalactite milk into the medicinal soup. Immediately, she saw the medicinal soup turn milky white, and the medicinal soup faintly contained rich heaven-earth essence qi. However, this was different from the heaven-earth essence qi that Zhang Xiaohua usually absorbed. It seemed that it couldn't be directly absorbed. Zhang Xiaohua knew that she had suffered a great loss. Therefore, in the next few days, Zhang Xiaohu didn't change the water that he bathed in, and only changed some medicinal herbs occasionally. Of course, the effects of the heavenly materials and earthly treasures were different. Zhang Xiaohu's previously uneven scars were not only smoothed out, but the rough, Old skin had also fallen off and new, smooth, white skin had grown out. To use some common terms, it would be as smooth as grease and as white as jade. See, Zhang Xiaohua watched second brother come out of the wooden tub and wipe himself dry with a towel. She smacked her lips and said, "Second brother, now I know what people mean by freshly peeled lamb. TSK, your snow-white flesh. Even the female disciples of the ethereal hall would be ashamed if they saw it." Bah! Zhang Xiaohu heard and hurriedly put on his clothes, scolding, "Nothing good comes out of a dog's mouth. Why do you have so many ideas at such a young age? Let the junior sisters see if I can still stay in the ethereal hall." Zhang Xiaohua said shyly. Then she stopped after saying one word. Zhang Xiaohu asked curiously, "Why did you stop?" "Better not, or you will scold me again." Zhang Xiaohu scolded with a smile. "Since you know, it's better not to say it." At this time, someone shouted in the courtyard outside. Zhang Xiaohu responded, put on his clothes, and went out. It was Chang'e and Qinchin outside. When Qinchin saw Zhang Xiaohu, she was obviously stunned. She pointed at his face, as if there were flowers growing on it, and said, "Senior brother, why are you so white? I haven't seen you for a few days, and you have changed completely?" Then she turned to look at Chang'e, clapping her hands and saying, "Senior brother, you are even whiter than Sister Chang'e." At this time, Zhang Xiaohua inadvertently saw the faint smile on Zhang Xiaohua's face. She immediately knew what this guy didn't say just now. Suddenly, her face was burning. Chang'e didn't understand what was going on. She had been here every day for the past few days, so naturally, she couldn't see the change in Zhang Xiaohu. She complained, "Qinchin, what are you talking about?" When she saw Zhang Xiaohu's appearance, she was scared and hurried to support him. She asked with concern, "Xiaohu, why is your face so red? Was the water too hot? Xiaohua, come and see what happened to your second brother." Zhang Xiaohua said lazily, "Second brother is sweating too much." Second, "Sister Chang'e, you'd better help him to the room, quickly, and drink more herbal tea." "Well, okay." Chang'e carefully supported Zhang Xiaohu. Her hands and shoulders leaned on Zhang Xiaohu's body, so Zhang Xiaohu's face became redder. Seeing Chang'e supporting Zhang Xiaohu into the room, Qinchin was very surprised and asked in a low voice, "Zhang Xiaohua, how did you treat senior brother? Not only is his injury healed, but his face." Then she touched her very smooth round face and said bitterly, "Alas, I have been in the dungeon all this time, and there are a lot of bumps on my face. I can't go down no matter how hard I try. Can you help me think of a way?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. Then she rolled her eyes and said in a low voice, "Wait a moment." After he finished speaking, he ran in like a wisp of smoke. Not long after, he came out with a jade bottle in his hand and stuffed it into Qinchin's hand. He lowered his voice and said, "Junior sister, I don't usually tell her. This is my exclusive secret recipe. Every morning and night, use the contents of this jade bottle to rub on your face. Every hour, wash it off with water. I guarantee that after a few days, the lumps on your face will disappear." "Really?" Qinchin was so happy that she almost jumped up. She carefully opened it, and sure enough, a fragrance floated out of the jade bottle. "Put it away quickly. Don't tell anyone. I don't have many precious things like this. If Sister Chang'e sees it, you won't have a share. This good thing should be shared with Sister Chang'e." Zhang Xiaohua stared at her fiercely and said, "Don't you see that Sister Chang'e's face is so smooth that even a fly will slide off it? Does she need it?" "Uffed." Qinchin laughed and said, "That's right." Immediately, she hid the jade bottle in her arms. "What are you talking about? Come in quickly." Chang'e stuck her head out of the hall and shouted. Zhang Xiaohua winked at Qinchin and quickly ran in. Qinchin smiled and followed her. In the east room, Zhang Xiaohu was still sitting under the quilt. Although the treatment for several days was effective, he still couldn't fully recover. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua and Qinchin come in happily, Zhang Xiaohu asked, "What's wrong?" What's so funny? Chun Chin shook his head with a smile, but Zhang Xiaohua said seriously, "Second brother, how do you feel about your injury now?" Zhang Xiaohu didn't understand and said, "Very good," and, before he finished speaking, Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand and said, "Well, second brother, there's something I want to tell you. Besides, Sister Chang'e and Chin Chin are both here. It's the right time." Chang'e just entered the room and asked curiously, "What's the matter? You not only want Xiaohu to recover, but also want me and Chun Chun to listen to it together?" -3. Chapter 731. It's like this. Zhang Xiaohua told the three of them about the conversation between Yang Ruping and Aunt Qin that night in the Misty Hall. Finally, she smiled and said, "I won't hide it from second brother and elder sister Chang'e. If Hall Master Qin didn't tell Hall Master Yang that she suspected my identity, I would never tell you." Chang'e glanced at Zhang Xiaohu and said to Zhang Xiaohua seriously, "Xiaohua, my master has deep feelings for the Misty School. Her only wish now is to revive the Misty School. But according to the hierarch's intention and the current situation, this is simply impossible. In the past, there was Deputy Hall Master Zhong in the Misty Hall. He supported Zhao Jian and wanted to win over some of the disciples of the Misty School. Now that Deputy Hall Master Zhong has returned to the Lingering Fragrance Peak and Zhao Jian has been killed, those disloyal disciples have no idea for the time being. Looking at the hierarch's grace to Xiaohu, I think Hall Master and Master's analysis is very correct. The fragrance cult wants to take advantage of Xiaohu's late entry and shallow feelings for the Misty School and his identity as a direct disciple. They want to train him well and use him to restrain Hall Master Yang. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "When I was in the future, I met a disciple of the Misty School and heard him talk about the destruction of the Misty School. At that time, the hierarch seemed to have promised Hall Master Yang that she would be in charge of the Misty Hall. How can there be so many restraints now? If you don't want her to be the hierarch, just let her abdicate. Why go through so much trouble? Moreover, if second brother wants to be a disciple of the Misty Hall, just let him be. Anyway, in the Shirxin Peak, who dares to say no?" Zhang Xiaohu and the other two were also puzzled. They could only say, "How can we understand the hierarch's thoughts? The only thing we can do is to fight for more benefits for ourselves when we are other people's pawns." Chin Chin looked at Zhang Xiaohua and said, "But since Master has found some clues, even if he doesn't ask now, I guess he will ask me and senior sister to investigate it sooner or later." Zhang Xiaohua, "Do you think we should tell Master?" "Say it. Why don't you say it?" Zhang Xiaohua said without hesitation. "In any case, I'll be here for a few more years, so it would be more convenient to explain things clearly. However, I think it's best to only let those who knew me know about this. Hall Master Yang and the others should keep it a secret." "Oh, all right." Chen Qin didn't quite understand what Zhang Xiaohua meant by convenience. However, since she didn't hide it from her master, she was satisfied. As for Hall Leader Yang, she didn't have to be responsible for her, did she? "That's right. Xiaohua, can you tell us in detail about Ancestor, Hu, and the others that you mentioned in the Yulon Grand Canyon?" "I want to tell Master," Chang'e asked. Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, "I just happened to meet them. I only heard a little about it. Moreover, the Misty School is being chased by 3 families. They don't know my identity, so it's impossible to talk about it in detail. It's not bad to say so much. If Hall Master Qin asks me, then I'll tell him. Otherwise, I think it's better to hide it. You can't tell the source of the information. Of course, we know this. However, what Master said makes sense. Xiaohu's martial arts are not as good as mine. The credit in the canyon is mine. Hee, if it weren't for Xiaohua, how could I hide it from Master?" Chang'e smiled and looked at Zhang Xiaohu. "You have the nerve to say that. What credit do you have? If I didn't have such a good brother, wouldn't you all be buried in the belly of the wolves?" Zhang Xiaohu stared at Chang'e angrily. "Oh, by the way, Sister Chang'e, your arm seems to be a lot better recently." Zhang Xiaohua saw that her second brother was about to praise her and very gracefully changed the topic. And that's right. When Chang'e heard Zhang Xiaohua ask about her injury, she immediately praised, "Your bone solidifying pill is really magical. How long has it been? I feel that in a few days the splint can be removed." It's so magical? Zhang Xiaohua said in surprise. "Come, Sister Chang'e, let me see." Hearing Zhang Xiaohua's words, Qin couldn't help but ask, "Zhang Xiaohua, don't you know the effect of your own medicinal pill?" "This," Zhang Xiaohua said embarrassedly, "it's the first time I've used it, the first time I've used it." Bang! The three of them almost fell to the ground. She dared to let others take the medicinal pill that she hadn't used before, and she really did. When Zhang Xiaohua checked Chang'e's injured arm, he couldn't help but ponder. The effect of this bone-solidifying pill was really amazing. Chang'e's broken bones had already healed. After a while, he would be able to move freely. It seemed that what she said when she gave the prescription was true. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said to Zhang Xiaohu, "Since Sister Chang'e's bones will heal soon, you don't have to worry about yourself. Although your bones were seriously injured and were broken by the law enforcement disciples, with the treatment of the bone solidifying pill, they will recover after a while. It should be much faster than the injury on my left hand." Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohu was moved and asked, "Then, if the joints of the bones are broken, can the bone solidifying pill be used to treat them?" "It should be possible. Anyway, it's just to treat the bones," Zhang Xiaohua answered casually. Zhang Xiaohua's casual answer was like a gospel in the ears of Zhang Xiaohu and the other two. They said with a trembling voice, "Are you sure?" "Xiaohua." Zhang Xiaohua shook her head. "Who knows? It's the first time I've used it on Sister Chang'e, and the second time for second brother, but I think it's 60% sure." The three of them were a little disappointed, but they all looked at each other and didn't say anything. They chatted for a while and guessed who would be sent to Shixin Peak as the deputy hall chief after Lingxiang Peak returned. When the four of them unanimously confirmed that Chen would definitely not be sent, Chang'e and Qin smiled and said goodbye to each other. After Chang'e left, Zhang Xiaohu pulled Zhang Xiaohua and said mysteriously, "Xiaohua, I have something to tell you. Go and see if there's anyone in the yard, and then close the door." Seeing that her second brother was so cautious, Zhang Xiaohua laughed and said, "Second brother, you don't want to go to Xiangism, do you? In fact, even if you go, I won't stop you." "Bah!" Zhang Xiaohu spat and said, "I was born in Misty School, and I'll die in Misty School. Although I'm in Shixin Peak now, my heart is in ethereal heights." I'm kidding. Seeing that her second brother was really angry, Zhang Xiaohua quickly apologized and then went to the yard to check with divine sense. After locking the door, she returned to the room and said seriously, "Say it, second brother. If you elope with second sister-in-law, I'll definitely help you." "You." Zhang Xiaohu was speechless. "Can you not be so active?" Zhang Xiaohua had a bitter expression on his face as he shrugged his shoulders. "Second brother, I'm still young. I can't compare to you. If I'm older, wouldn't I age faster?" Okay. Zhang Xiaohu also begged for mercy, you're right. Then he still looked out of the window worriedly and said, "Is there really no one outside?" "No. What about behind the house?" "I've just checked. I can guarantee that there's not even a female fly within 2 feet of the yard." Then Zhang Xiaohua laughed and said, "Second brother, what's the big secret? Tell me quickly. I'm still looking forward to being scared by your secret." This time Zhang Xiaohu did not laugh and said seriously, "It's like this, Xiaohua. On the first day when I was sent to the dungeon by Vice Hall Master Zhong, that Zhao Jian came to the dungeon alone at night. This bastard..." Zhang Xiaohua gritted her teeth and said, "This bastard is too evil. Second brother, you've been wronged. Are you in pain?" Zhang Xiaohu did not understand and said, "It's not painful? My acupoints are all sealed, so I don't feel much pain." That's good. Zhang Xiaohua felt lucky and said, "You didn't tell second sister-in-law about this, right?" Zhang Xiaohu shook his head and said, "No, this is a serious matter. I can only tell you. I don't dare to tell anyone. Zhang Xiaohua nodded. That's right. Only I, as your brother, can keep this a secret for you. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohu said curiously, I don't think I told you what happened. This. Zhang Xiaohua shrugged and said, we're all humans. What's so hard to guess? Pei. Zhang Xiaohu spat and said angrily, I'm talking about Zhao Jian's palm on my dantian and crippled my cultivation. Oh, I know this bastard is so useless. What? Zhang Xiaohua just understood and jumped up and shouted, This bastard is too despicable. He actually crippled your inner strength. Second brother, do you know where Zhao Jian is buried? Let's dig him out and grind his bones to dust. But Zhang Xiaohu tugged at Zhang Xiaohua and said, but I realize that my dantian is perfectly fine. This inner energy of the divine misty art I've cultivated a lot these days. This time, it was Zhang Xiaohua's turn to be dumbfounded. She stared at Zhang Xiaohu and said, Second brother, can you not joke with me like this? If you don't believe me, take a look. Zhang Xiaohu extended his hand in front of Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua really did not believe it. She circulated her true qi into Zhang Xiaohu's meridians and immediately knew that her second brother was right. The dantian was indeed intact. How is this possible? Zhang Xiaohua did not believe it. Did Zhao Jian show mercy? How is that possible? Zhang Xiaohu also smiled and said, Didn't he just want to cripple me? How could he show mercy or be negligent? I remember that I even used my inner strength to check. Then what happened? After that, my meridians were sealed and I couldn't check them. When Lord Chenqin used his internal energy to check my meridians, I realized that something was wrong. He actually said that I had lost all my internal energy, but didn't mention that my dantian was broken. These few days, I've been slowly cultivating my inner strength. Only then did I realize that it was indeed the case. That's why I told you. I see. Zhang Xiaohua fell into deep thought. Then, she channeled her true qi into Zhang Xiaohu's dantian and carefully examined it. What's this? Zhang Xiaohua asked in astonishment. -3. Chapter 732. Zhang Xiaohua sent a wisp of true energy to check Zhang Xiaohu's dantian. However, in Zhang Xiaohua's eyes, there was nothing strange about her second brother's dantian. It was completely intact, but it felt very small. Compared to her own dantian, it was simply a small puddle. Thus, she couldn't help but mock. Second brother, your dantian is too small. That's not right. What's going on here? She saw that a certain part of Zhang Xiaohu's dantian was clearly much thinner than the other parts. And in this part of the dantian, the unrefined medicinal power of the meridian nourishing pill was obviously more. After seeing it clearly, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, Second brother is indeed a fool's fortune. Even if you were schemed against by Zhao Jian, he didn't succeed. Zhang Xiaohu was puzzled. Zhao Jian has already checked. How could he be negligent? It's like this, second brother. Back then, Zhao Jian had indeed destroyed your dantian and destroyed your cultivation. Even the ethereal divine art that you originally cultivated, as well as the cultivation that I used to increase my cultivation, had all dissipated. When Zhao Jian checked, he also saw that you did not have the slightest bit of internal energy. However, he never thought that you had taken the meridian nourishing pill before. This meridian nourishing pill, as its name implies, nourishes and improves the meridians. At that time, when I helped second brother refine the medicinal power, I also used it in the dantian, and a lot of the residual medicinal power was left in the dantian. And after your dantian was broken, the medicinal power of this meridian nourishing pill was actually able to repair your dantian. Ha! Second brother, I have to say that your character is not bad. Zhang Xiaohua smacked her lips and said, Even I didn't expect that the meridian nourishing pill could actually repair the dantian? Oh, right, of course. When Chen checked your dantian, the medicinal power of the meridian nourishing pill had already repaired your dantian. so she said that there was no problem with your meridians. Moreover, didn't she also want to refine your internal energy? That was because it had already dissipated. Your major acupoints had been sealed, and you didn't have time to cultivate. Naturally, there was nothing left. Only the little bit of medicinal effect of the meridian nourishing pill in your dantian was seen as the medicinal effect of the cinnabar fruit. And when it reaches my dantian, it's all ordinary medicinal power. If I don't experience it myself, I won't be able to tell what kind of medicinal power it is. Your dantian is fine. I've been soaking you in medicinal soup these past few days. The spirit herbs used in those medicinal soups are all many years old. With the addition of the sky stalactite milk, second brother, you only need to cultivate a little. Wouldn't these few years of inner strength be as easy as pie? Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohu's eyes shone with excitement. He didn't thank Zhang Xiaohua first, nor did he ask how he could cultivate better. Instead, he asked with a trembling voice, Xiaohua, this so-called meridian soothing pill of yours, how many more do you have? Zhang Xiaohua said curiously, not many. Let me count. She counted with her fingers for a long time and said, there are a total of 18 pills. For you, Sister Chang'e and Chen Chen each ate one. There should be 15 pills left. What's wrong? Second brother. This. Zhang Xiaohu was a little anxious and said, Xiaohua, this medicinal pill is so magical. I think it must be extremely precious. Can you give me some? Oh, I don't need many. 5 pills? Oh, if there are more, 3 pills will do. If not, 1 pill will do. Zhang Xiaohu couldn't speak clearly. His eyes stared at Zhang Xiaohua, full of desire. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and said, Are you crazy, second brother? Zhang Xiaohu was shocked. He saw Zhang Xiaohua take out a jade bottle from her arms and throw it to Zhang Xiaohu casually, saying, You just want some meridian soothing pills. You said so much to me. You are so polite that I have goosebumps all over my body. Well, these 15 pills are all for you. You can eat them all. However, it seems that only the first pill is useful for improving cultivation. I don't know what effect it will have on the meridians and dantian. But if you eat more, it may be able to strengthen your sex drive. Zhang Xiaohu caught the jade bottle containing the meridian soothing pills in a hurry. He rolled his eyes at Zhang Xiaohua and ignored her ridicule. He opened it and said, It seems that there are not enough for 15 pills. It seems that I gave one to someone. I don't remember. Zhang Xiaohua scratched her head. Gosh, Zhang Xiaohu said. You don't even know the number of such precious pills? Alas, if I had known this, I wouldn't have let Chang'e and Chen Chen take them. Oh, second brother, you are so selfish. Do you want to surpass second sister-in-law in martial arts and dominate the family? Then he said mysteriously, You don't have to worry about this. I have specially prepared it for you. When the time is right, I will give you a surprise. I promise that second sister-in-law will never be able to catch up with you in this lifetime. Zhang Xiaohu didn't listen to her nonsense. He carefully put the jade bottle in his arms and pinched it uneasily, saying, These pills are not enough. Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously, Didn't you just say that 1 pill would do? Why now? Oh, second brother, I forgot. Zhang Xiaohua suddenly realized. She patted her forehead and said, Why didn't I think of it? Didn't Hero Wen's dantian also break and his decades of internal energy dissipated? If he uses this pulse nourishing pill, won't he be able to repair his dantian? Then he frowned and said, But second brother, your situation is different from theirs. You took the meridian nourishing pill first, and your dantian has medicinal power. When Zhao Jian broke your dantian, the meridian nourishing pill was able to repair it. But Hero Wen has already lost his internal energy for so many years. He might not succeed. Zhang Xiaohu smiled and said, We have to try. It's better to have hope than despair. That might not be the case. If there's hope, then it's better to be defeated by it. Zhang Xiaohua shook his head. Zhang Xiaohu didn't reply. He knew that he couldn't give up this chance to repair his master's dantian. Even if he failed, he could still do something for his master. Then Zhang Xiaohu probed again. Xiaohua, do you still have that bone coagulation pill? Zhang Xiaohua's eyes lit up and she smiled. Second brother's idea reminded me. Since the pulse nourishing pill can repair the dantian, then can the bone coagulation pill be able to repair the joints? I was wondering why you guys kept asking me about the effects of the bone coagulation pill. It seems like you guys are also thinking about the martial uncles and martial uncles of the Misty School. Zhang Xiaohu nodded and said, You saw my master in the Misty Hall. You also know how High Master's martial arts were back in Lu Town. But now he is no different from a strong man. He doesn't say it, but how can I not know the pain in his heart? Ai, it's a pity that you only have a few pills. Zhang Xiaohua smiled mysteriously and patted her chest. I thought second brother was regretting something. With only your brother here, wouldn't you be able to get as many pills as you want? What? Zhang Xiaohu suddenly wanted to lift the quilt and get off the bed. Did you really refine it yourself? Zhang Xiaohua was shocked and quickly held him down. Don't move, second brother. Don't worry, speak slowly. Even if you lie on the bed, I can still hear your surprise. You don't have to walk to the ground to express it. Zhang Xiaohu was held down by Zhang Xiaohua and couldn't move. He was surprised. Zhang Xiaohua's strength is getting stronger and stronger. Didn't I tell you in the Yulon Grand Canyon that I refined it myself? Do you think it was given by the inner disciple of the lingering fragrance peak? Zhang Xiaohu said embarrassedly, That's not it. You said you were in the pill opening hall. We all know that the pill opening hall refines pills. You must have taken it from the pill opening hall. Zhang Xiaohua wiped her forehead and said, It would be great if the pill opening hall had such good pills. And it's no wonder that your pills were given by the disciples on duty of the pill opening hall. It's normal for you to think so. However, Zhang Xiaohu's expression immediately darkened as he said, It's a pity that, although there were some alchemy rooms on Shishine Peak, the alchemy furnaces in those alchemy rooms had already been removed by the fragrant cult when we arrived. It turns out that even if the alchemy hall's disciples wanted to refine pills, they couldn't. So, Zhang Xiaohua still looked unfathomable and said with a smile, Second brother, you don't have to worry about this. When you recover, just find me a pill room. You don't have to worry about other things. Oh, by the way, your Misty Hall has to provide herbs. Zhang Xiaohu realized and said, Of course, where did you get the herbs? Zhang Xiaohua was secretly happy and then said, Be careful to keep it a secret. Don't catch Chin Chin and take him to the lingering fragrance peak without giving you many pills. Chin Chin? Zhang Xiaohu showed a strange smile on his face. I heard from our Chin Chin that you seem to know Chin Chin and have a good relationship with him. When he left, he pulled you aside and whispered to you, He, this Chin Chin's figure is good, and his voice is nice. But how old is he? How does he look? Sweat, Zhang Xiaohua sweated. Second brother, when did you become so gossipy? Alas, Xiaohua, you're not young anymore. It's normal for young people to fall in love. This Chen Chen's identity is good. Stop! Zhang Xiaohua, who had always laughed at Zhang Xiaohu and Chang'e, now also tasted the taste of being laughed at. If there was such a thing, it would be fine, but who was Chin Chin? He was an inner disciple. How could he care about her? Being laughed at by second brother like this. There was no meaning in getting any pills. By the way, second brother, you just said about the pharmacy hall. Where is Captain He? Zhang Xiaohua quickly changed the topic and said, I remember asking you in the Yulon Grand Canyon. You just said it was okay, but didn't tell me the details. I've been here for several days and haven't seen him. Where is he? This. Zhang Xiaohu was a little speechless. He knew He Tianchu's position in Zhang Xiaohua's heart, so he didn't want to tell her about He Tianchu's situation. He thought that he could gloss it over, but he didn't expect that Zhang Xiaohua would chase him to Shishine Peak by accident. It seemed unrealistic if he didn't say it. So, Zhang Xiaohu cleared his throat and said, Xiaohua, martial uncle, his situation is very bad. -3. Chapter 733. What's wrong? Zhang Xiaohua asked anxiously, Captain, what happened to him? Is it possible that he's no longer alive? Zhang Xiaohua told her the worst-case scenario. That's not it. It's just that. Zhang Xiaohu hurriedly explained. It's just that his meridians are all broken, his dantian is damaged, and all the bones in his body are broken. He's no different from a cripple. Oh. Zhang Xiaohua sighed and said, so that's how it is. As long as he's still alive, it's good. But then she asked curiously, Captain, he is a disciple of the pharmacy hall. Even if he's a disciple, his martial arts should be slightly better. How could he be so ruthless when the Misty School was destroyed? Zhang Xiaohu shook his head. Uncle, his injury was not in the Misty Heights. He was only slightly injured at that time. Zhang Xiaohua was even more puzzled, but her eyes were fierce. That is to say, Captain, he was injured at Shixin Peak? Then, second brother, who did this? Zhang Xiaohua did not ask what the reason was, but directly asked who it was. Who else could it be? Zhang Xiaohu smiled bitterly. It's the same person who tortured me. Zhongpei, Zhang Xiaohua said coldly, this guy's character seems to be very bad. He always comes out of my mouth. It seems that I have to give him some unforgettable memories. Zhang Xiaohu did not say anything this time. On one hand, he knew how his younger brother's martial arts were. He was someone who did not even put the blood wolves in his eyes. Why would he be afraid of a mere Zhongpei? On the other hand, Zhongpei had returned to Lingxiang Peak. Where could he find him? Breaking into Lingxiang Peak? Oh dear, it was better to wash his face with cold water. No disciple of the Chuanxiang cult would have such a ridiculous idea. He would let Zhang Xiaohua have her way. Then Zhang Xiaohu explained, Xiaohua, do you remember the medicinal field in Huanxi Villa? Of course, that's where I fought. How could I not remember? Well, since you remember, you should also know about the few fields that have not sprouted, right? Of course, Captain he and the others went to those medicinal fields that didn't germinate. Zhang Xiaohu said disappointedly, that's where the problem lies. If those medicinal fields didn't germinate, it would be fine. But when you came to our Misty Mountain Villa to participate in the martial arts exhibition, these medicinal fields that had never germinated actually germinated. Zhang Xiaohua was still somewhat at a loss and said, this is a good thing, Doesn't matter, Lord, I want these medicinal fields to germinate. He was the clearest about the reason why the herbs had sprouted. However, after the martial arts exhibition, he had returned to the Guozhuang house with Zhang Xiaohu. Many things had happened after that, so he had long forgotten about it. Zhang Xiaohu smiled bitterly. If the three sects hadn't besieged the Misty School and destroyed the Misty School, perhaps this would have been a good thing. That day, the disciples of the fragrant religion entered Huanxi Villa and searched the entire villa. It seemed like they were looking for some kind of secret martial arts book. However, they were careless. This medicinal field was indeed seen by an inner disciple who had been a vice hall master of the Pill Expansion Hall. He immediately recognized that it was a type of medicinal plant that he didn't recognize. Thus, he was cautious and picked some back. When he returned to the fragrant religion and inquired, it was even more amazing. This medicinal plant was actually planted by the fragrant religion a long time ago, but it didn't germinate. Thus, the inner disciple reported the situation to the sect leader. The sect leader seemed to attach great importance to this matter and handed it over to Zhongpei to handle. Originally, martial uncle, he was an unknown figure in the medicine hall. Almost no one knew what was going on. However, at this time, someone wanted to get close to Zhongpei, so he mentioned martial uncle he. Who is this person? Zhang Xiaohua gritted his teeth and asked. Who else could it be? You know this person too. Isn't he from the medicine hall? Chang, Deacon Chang? Yes, that's him. Chang Biao, that arrogant guy. Where is he now? Zhang Xiaohua asked indifferently. Him. Zhang Xiaohua's mouth was filled with mockery as he said. He wanted to gain merit and use martial Uncle He to exchange for his future. However, he forgot that he was also a deacon of the medicine hall and knew more than martial Uncle He. Martial Uncle He was only sent to Huanxi Villa because he was ostracized. Chang Biao was a popular figure in the medicine hall. When martial Uncle He was captured by Zhong Pei, he didn't say a word no matter how they tortured him. Zhong Pei, who was also eager to gain merit, also sent Chang Biao to the dungeon. I heard that when the law enforcement disciples interrogated martial Uncle He, they held back a few tricks, afraid that he would lose his life. The reason for the medicinal plant's germination was that it was lost. However, they didn't show any mercy to Chang Biao and the others. They actually beat them to death. Serves them right. Zhang Xiaohua snorted and scolded. This is the most suitable ending for such people. Then she asked with concern, "What about Captain He?" "Alas, didn't we just tell you what happened to martial Uncle He?" Later, Zhong Pei was also ruthless. Under the premise of keeping martial Uncle He alive, he used everything he could. Now, martial Uncle He's living a life worse than death. Zhong Pei is really ruthless. In fact, Captain He doesn't know why the medicinal plant germinated. Zhang Xiaohua looked at Zhang Xiaohua strangely. He wanted to ask her, "Martial Uncle He doesn't know. Do you know?" However, it would be best if he didn't know about this matter. There was no need for him to ask. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly remembered that when he saw the medicinal plant that didn't germinate on Timu Peak, he had asked Bai Huan about it. Bai Huan said that it had just been planted a few years ago. At this time, it was related to He Tianqu's matter. Wasn't it something that happened at that time? The fragrance cult had planted it before, but it didn't germinate, so they stopped planting it. However, when they searched Huanxi Mountain Villa, they found that the medicinal plant of the Misty School had actually survived. They couldn't find fault with Oyen, so they could only look at He Tianqiu. After all, he was the leader of the medicinal plant planting team. Of course, Zhang Xiaohua should have been mentioned at that time. However, he had been there for such a long time, so he must have been ignored. But who would have thought that this guy was the key to the medicinal plant's germination? When the pill-spreading hall saw that the medicinal plant of the Misty School could be planted, of course, they also wanted to try. Therefore, several medicinal plants that didn't germinate appeared on the peak of Timu Peak. Just like Huanxi Mountain Villa. Unfortunately, without Zhang Xiaohua, these medicinal plants still wouldn't germinate after 4 or 5 years. I really have an affinity with these medicinal plants that don't germinate. Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly. However, he immediately remembered that he still had a seed on Timu Peak for experiment. When he left, there were no signs of germination. It had been a long time since he had taken care of it, so it was probably still the same. Well, when there's a chance, I'll just destroy it. Who knows what will happen? After listening to Zhang Xiaohu's explanation, Zhang Xiaohua felt a little guilty. After all, if he hadn't attracted the lightning, the seeds of the medicinal plants wouldn't have germinated. If they wouldn't have germinated, He Tianqiu would have been fine. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua asked, "Then where does Leader He live now?" After thinking for a while, Zhang Xiaohu told her where He Tianqiu lived. He then reminded her, "Master's junior uncle, his situation is very bad. It's better not to visit him. It will also cause misunderstandings." "Oh, I understand." Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, "I'm now a disciple on duty at Pill Expanding Hall. If I visit him rashly, the people from Ethereal Hall will inevitably think that I'm going to interrogate him. Well, I don't care, but they will hate me in the future." Then, after thinking for a while, she said, "Second brother, give me one pulse-nourishing pill first." "Why?" Zhang Xiaohu didn't agree. "You gave it to me. Look at how stingy you are. I'll return you 10 pills tomorrow. I can give it to you, but you have to tell me what you're going to use it for." "What use?" "Of course it's for Leader He. I don't use it myself." Zhang Xiaohu smiled and said, "That's right. Actually, among these 15 pills, I've left one for Master's junior uncle He. He was so good to you in the past. How could I forget him?" "What about the others?" Zhang Xiaohua frowned and asked, "Alas, my master and master's dantian were all broken." Zhang Xiaohu sighed and said, "You know master's junior uncle Shui, master's junior uncle Lu, and many others." Miss Xueqing, Miss Shui, Master Lu Mingyue? Zhang Xiaohua was surprised. They were all people who had helped him before. Seeing Zhang Xiaohu nodding silently, Zhang Xiaohua said, "Second brother, let me handle this. If it weren't for them, we would still be farming in the Guozhuang house. Maybe we would have been beaten to death by the bullies in Lu Town. I must save them." But Zhang Xiaohua smiled mysteriously and said, "You can't tell them that I saved them." Zhang Xiaohu asked curiously, "Then how are you going to save them?" "Second brother, you don't have to worry about that. Just tell them that you can save them and take them to a secluded place." "I'll do it." Zhang Xiaohu was also a smart person. He nodded and said, "That's good. It'll be easier to do things if you keep your identity a secret." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she knew that her second brother had misunderstood. She couldn't help but smile and say, "Second brother, actually I didn't have any thoughts before. However, after hearing what Hall Master Yang and Aunt Qin said that night, I had a feeling." "What?" "Since the leader of the fragrance cult wants to rope you in, why don't you go with the flow? You're a direct disciple of the Misty School. This time, you've made a great contribution. Your status in the hearts of the ordinary disciples has greatly increased. If you can heal the injuries of the older generation's martial uncles, do you think they won't be grateful to you? Can't they push you to the front?" Zhang Xiaohu's heart was moved. He was very tempted, but then he asked tentatively, "But doesn't the Misty Hall still have Hall Master Yang?" "Second brother, didn't you hear what I said? Hall Master Yang isn't very willing to be the Hall Master. Or rather, she's willing to be the Hall Master in name and protect the disciples of the Misty School. If the disciples of the Misty School grow up, she may let go. This matter is a bit serious." Zhang Xiaohu smiled bitterly. "I have to think about it carefully." -3. Chapter 734. As the ancient saying goes, the times create heroes. In this world, all heroes were able to walk in front of the crowd because of coincidences and opportunities. From there, they revealed their talents and achieved great feats. Heroes were also very easy to take advantage of the times and were good at using everything that was beneficial to them, just like how fire borrowed the power of wind and wind borrowed the power of fire. They complemented each other. Zhang Xiaohu naturally had such a desire. When he first entered the Misty School, he was criticized by others because he wanted to achieve something to prove that he was indeed stronger than others and worthy of his identity as a direct disciple. However, his starting point was too low. He couldn't practice martial arts and was always behind the other disciples. When the Misty School was destroyed, he followed them to Shirxin Peak. His status as a direct disciple was even more awkward. His teachers in the Misty School should be his backing, but now they were all crippled. To put it bluntly, they were struggling at death's door. They were pawns that the incense cult used to stabilize the disciples of the Misty School. Zhang Xiaohu instantly became a rootless duckweed. Zhong Pei, the representative of the incense cult in the Misty Hall, had set up Zhao Jian as a benchmark to deal with the direct disciples of the Misty School. Zhang Xiaohu was always suppressed by Zhao Jian. In the current situation, the incense cult changed their strategy and wanted to support Zhang Xiaohu, a direct disciple who didn't seem to have a deep relationship with the Misty School. Secondly, with the support of Zhang Xiaohua's elixir, Zhang Xiaohu should be able to stand out in terms of internal strength and become the most outstanding disciple of the second generation. Thirdly, if Zhang Xiaohu saved Wenwenhai, Xueqing, Lu Mingyue, and the others, Zhang Xiaohu's backing would be very solid. Although their martial arts had recovered and they should be strong candidates to compete for the position of Misty Hall's Hall Master, Zhang Xiaohu was not only their direct disciple, but also their savior. No one would compete with Zhang Xiaohu for this position. These three aspects of the situation were extremely advantageous to Zhang Xiaohu. They could all create a hero like Zhang Xiaohu, just as Zhang Xiaolong said when he married Lu Qian. Just wait for the opportunity to meet, and the hidden dragon will soar to the sky. At this time, it was a good opportunity for Zhang Xiaohu, who had been dormant in the Misty School for several years, to soar to the sky in one fell swoop. Thinking of this, how could Zhang Xiaohu not feel a rush of excitement? It's just, Zhang Xiaohu was a little worried. Now that I have cultivated the internal strength of the ethereal divine art, there is internal strength in my dantian that is different from the plain mental cultivation method. Can I still cultivate the plain mental cultivation method? If I can't, why did the hierarch choose me? Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, "Leave this to me. Since the previous disciples of the incense peak can cultivate it, I think I can help you. If I can't, I will help you dissolve the internal strength of the ethereal divine art. That should be enough. And that's the only way. Then, should I still cultivate the ethereal divine art in the next few days? Let's take a look at the plain mental cultivation method first. If you cultivate too much of the ethereal divine art, you may not be able to cultivate it at the same time as the plain mental cultivation method." Zhang Xiaohu nodded. Then Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Second brother, it's better to give those few pulse nourishing pills to me. You don't know how to use them anyway." "Hee, I know." After saying that, Zhang Xiaohu reluctantly returned the jade bottle to Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua tucked it into his bosom and said, "Don't feel bad about it. Once I've healed Captain He Heroine and the others, help me find a pill room and I'll refine it for you. A pill room is not easy. There are many on Shirshine Peak, but they are all abandoned. When my body is a little better, I will take you to choose. By the way, second brother, I want to ask again. Do Manor Lord Oyanu and sister Chiu Tong live nearby?" Zhang Xiaohu shook his head and said, "The people of Huanxi Mountain Villa are on the other side of Shirshine Peak. The security is very tight. It is inconvenient for the disciples of Misty Hall to go there. I think you should wait. Are they all right? There is no bad news. They should be fine. And, well, second brother, you rest first and look at the plain mental cultivation method. But don't cultivate it first. I will go and see Captain He." Zhang Xiaohu nodded. When he saw Zhang Xiaohua walking to the door, he suddenly asked, "Xiaohua, do you think this pulse-nourishing pill can really strengthen the yang energy?" Bang! Zhang Xiaohua fell to the ground and said, helplessly, "Maybe." "Then you refine more for me." Zhang Xiaohu ordered Zhang Xiaohua without hesitation. He Tianshu lived in a very remote place. It was a corner of a group of houses. There were many trees, flowers, and even a pond planted with lotus leaves and other things. Zhang Xiaohua found this place with great difficulty according to second brother's description. Seeing that there was no one around, she jumped on the wall and poked her head out to look carefully. This courtyard was different from Zhang Xiaohu's courtyard. It was not a small courtyard. Not only was it connected to other courtyards by walls, but there was also a row of houses in the courtyard. At this time, under a big willow tree in the courtyard, a person was lying lazily on a couch, squinting his eyes and basking in the warm sunlight. Wasn't this the He Tianshu that Zhang Xiaohua wanted to see? Zhang Xiaohua looked at He Tianshu from afar, who seemed to be resting with his eyes closed. He Tianshu should be in his 30s and was in the prime of his life. However, his hair was already white and there were many scars on his face. Not only did he look ferocious, but at first glance he looked like a man in his 40s or 50s. His appearance, when Zhang Xiaohua first met him, was long gone. This was Zhang Xiaohua's martial arts teacher. Seeing He Tianshu so dispirited, how could he feel good in his heart? At this time, one of the houses in the row was pushed open. A young disciple walked out and saw He Tianshu under the willow tree. He walked over quietly and asked softly, "Senior Uncle He, this disciple is going to eat. Do you still want to eat?" He Tianshu heard that and opened his eyes. He said weakly, "No need. You can eat by yourself. I'm not hungry." After saying that, he covered his face with his sleeves as if he was afraid of the glare of the sun. He continued to sleep. The disciple was in a difficult position. "Senior uncle, you should eat a little too. You only drink a little water and eat a little food these few days. This disciple was sent to take care of you. If you continue like this, how can your body take it? This disciple can't report back. Why are you so noisy? If I say I'm not eating, then I'm not eating. If I die, then you won't have to do these things." He Tianshu threw a tantrum for no reason. The disciple seemed to be used to it and didn't retort. He cupped his hands and left with a sigh. After the disciple left the courtyard, He Tianshu let out a long sigh. Something sparkled at the corner of his closed eyes. Zhang Xiaohua's heart ached. Just as she was about to go down, she saw He Tianshu struggling to get up from the couch. His arms were also struggling to hold onto the chair. However, when she saw that his sleeves were soft, Zhang Xiaohua knew that He Tianshu's joints were crushed and he couldn't use any strength. Sure enough, after a long time of effort, He Tianshu couldn't even sit up from the chair, let alone stand on the ground. When He Tianshu slumped down and hit the chair with all his strength, Zhang Xiaohua jumped down from the wall and slowly walked to He Tianshu's back. If it was in the past, He Tianshu would have heard Zhang Xiaohua's footsteps if she didn't hide her voice. But now, even when Zhang Xiaohua walked to his back, he still didn't feel anything. Sigh. Zhang Xiaohua also sighed. She pointed her finger and pressed on He Tianshu's acupuncture point. When He Tianshu closed his eyes, Zhang Xiaohua transferred a strand of true qi into his meridians and carefully examined them. Sure enough, He Tianshu's meridians seemed to have been attacked by a strong internal force and were torn apart. Many parts of his meridians were broken and seriously damaged. When she checked his dantian, it was the same. There was a big hole. After checking his meridians and dantian, Zhang Xiaohua placed her finger on his pulse and carefully checked his pulse. Her face unconsciously showed some worry. He Tianshu's internal organs were seriously injured. For many years, they hadn't been treated in time. It had been delayed for a long time. If they were to treat it now, it would be much more difficult. She didn't know if the Yuhuandan pill would work. Then, Zhang Xiaohua started from his arm. She used her hand to pinch it bit by bit and checked all the bones in his body. This time, the anger on her face was even stronger. Just as Zhang Xiaohu said, all the joints in He Tianshu's body were crushed. Moreover, many parts of his body were already deformed. It was obvious how terrible the torture he had suffered was. It turned out that Zhang Xiaohua hated Zhongpei. Now that she saw He Tianshu's condition, the hatred in her heart grew. If that bastard were to appear again, Zhang Xiaohua wouldn't hesitate to crush his throat. The bone-solidifying pill could heal He Tianshu's broken bones. However, because it had been a long time, some parts of his body would have to be broken again. The injuries to his meridians and dantian were also old. Zhang Xiaohua didn't know if the meridian-nourishing pill would be able to heal him. The most uncertain thing was He Tianshu's internal injuries. The Yuhuandan pill from Chuanxiang cult wasn't too reliable. It seemed like the most important thing now was to refine a cauldron of Yuhuandan pill. Of course, Zhang Xiaohua secretly treating He Tianshu's injuries wasn't the best method. Since she wanted to help her second brother gain popularity, she might as well let him do it. Therefore, the most important thing now was to make preparations. Hearing footsteps outside the courtyard, Zhang Xiaohua quickly extended her hand and unsealed He Tianshu's acupoints. Then, she quickly burrowed into the ground. The courtyard door was pushed open, and the person who came in was the disciple from before. The disciple saw that He Tianshu was lying there motionless, so he walked into his room. After taking another glance at He Tianshu, Zhang Xiaohua turned around and left the courtyard, heading straight for Zhang Xiaohu. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua return, Zhang Xiaohu was stunned. "You've already seen Marshal Uncle He?" Zhang Xiaohua nodded. Looking at Zhang Xiaohua's face, Zhang Xiaohua asked, "Marshal Uncle, he's not in a good condition, is he? Did he recognize you?" -3. Chapter 735. Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, I didn't let him see it. I just checked it, secretly. How is it? Are you sure? Zhang Xiaohu asked anxiously. Zhang Xiaohua still shook her head. No, I can only try. Besides, I think the Yuhuandan pill may not be useful. I have to refine some quickly. But the Yuhuandan pill was refined by the alchemist on Lingshan Peak. You, Zhang Xiaohu, didn't believe Zhang Xiaohua's words. Zhang Xiaohua didn't want to explain and said, Besides, there are only a few Yuhuandan pill. It's not enough. You'd better find me an alchemy room, quickly. Zhang Xiaohu smiled bitterly. Look at me. How can I find you an alchemy room? Besides, it takes a long time to find an alchemy room. I have to find it secretly. The alchemy room must not only be remote, but also be usable. It's not easy. Zhang Xiaohua was a little impatient. Where are your alchemy rooms? I'll go and see for myself. Anyway, it's fine as long as no one goes there. Zhang Xiaohu thought for a moment and said, I know one place and no one will go there. But can you hide from the eyes and ears of the disciples of Lingshan Peak? Of course. I don't dare to say about Qin Qin, but other disciples, such as Zhong Pei, can be ignored directly. Zhang Xiaohua said proudly. Well, that's good. Didn't I just tell you that Villa Master Oyanu and Sister Chiotong are on the other side of Shixin Peak? They only occupy a place near the top of the peak. Above their courtyard is a cliff. There seem to be several alchemy rooms there. When I went there in the early years, I saw it. No disciple of Misty Hall went to the alchemy room. However, if you want to go to the cliff, you must pass the law enforcement disciples. They are all cultivated by Lingshan Peak. You have to be careful. I see. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, When it gets dark, I'll go and take a look. By the way, second brother, think about how to pull Captain He out and give this credit to you. If it's effective, hero win, and the others should do the same in the future. Xiaohua, do you think I can do it? Zhang Xiaohu was still a little hesitant. Do you think second sister-in-law can marry you? Zhang Xiaohua rolled her eyes angrily. I guess there are a lot of people in the Misty Hall who want second sister-in-law. If you don't do something, second sister-in-law won't look at it, even if I give you a few secret marks. Zhang Xiaohu was speechless. Can't you say something else? You do remember Zhao Jian's dirty deeds very clearly. Yes, Xia Zai is pitiful. She was blind and fell in love with Zhao Jian, who is a beast in human clothing. But what about Sister Chang'e? She took a fancy to you, a so-called direct disciple. If you can't make a name for yourself, won't Sister Chang'e be pitiful? Zhang Xiaohu smiled bitterly. Your second sister-in-law doesn't take a fancy to me. It's my charm that makes her fall in love with me. Come on, don't flatter yourself. You probably can't hide the fact that you helped your master and martial uncle from second sister-in-law. She and Qin Qin must also know that I helped. Why don't you ask her and see what she thinks? If she doesn't support you, just take it that I said nothing. By the way, since Chang'e and Qin Qin can't hide it, my master and the others must know it in the end. Do you think they... Ahem, you were so lofty just now. Why do you think so much now? Who am I? I'm the wise, handsome, and fair-skinned younger brother of Zhang Xiaohu. What's the purpose of my treatment? Isn't it to let them owe you a favor? They will only give this credit to you. Xiaohu smiled and said, Little Blossom, you're thinking too simply. Martial uncles and the others aren't people with pure hearts and few desires. Zhang Xiaohua spread out her hands and said, Knowing that they will compete with you, will you still treat them? That's for sure, Zhang Xiaohu said firmly. So, Zhang Xiaohua patted Zhang Xiaohu's shoulder like an old man. Do what we should do and make your master and uncle embarrassed. You. Zhang Xiaohu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Between you and me, who is the elder brother? Seeing that it was still early, Zhang Xiaohua returned to her small courtyard. First, she took out the prescription of the Yuhuandan pill and looked at the main ingredients in it, so that she knew what to do. The main ingredients for refining the Yuhuandan pill were ice spirit grass and cold light grass. Needless to say, Zhang Xiaohua would use the best spirit grass collected by the underground cold pool. But what about the ingredients? There were also more than a dozen kinds of herbs. If it was someone else, it would be difficult to find them. These herbs were required by the lingering fragrance peak and were not easy to find in other places. However, Zhang Xiaohua had won a lot of herbs from the Pill Sprouting Hall's disciples in the Yulon Grand Canyon. He had also obtained the herbs collected by the Pill Sprouting Hall's disciples in the Strange Birch Forest, and the majority of the herbs collected by the Misty Hall's disciples. How could he lack herbs? Of course, in order to match the rare main ingredient, Zhang Xiaohua still spent a lot of effort to find the other ingredients that were of sufficient age to match the rare main ingredient. Zhang Xiaohua picked out the herbs and put them into his money pouch. Then he took out the bright sungrass and other herbs needed to refine the Meridian Soothing Pill from his belt. These herbs were obviously better than the ones from Rejuvenation Valley, so the quality of the Meridian Soothing Pill refined from them should be good as well. By the time Zhang Xiaohua was done, the sky was already dark. Zhang Xiaohua looked outside and put away the jade box. She floated up and flew towards the back of the mountain. Shixin Peak was indeed huge. Even if Zhang Xiaohua flew with the wind, she still took the time it took to brew a cup of tea to reach the back of the mountain. Just as Zhang Xiaohu said, when she arrived at the back of the mountain, she saw specks of lights in the distance. Zhang Xiaohua discovered that there were some powerful martial artists hiding in the dark. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to be careless. She landed on the ground and changed to escape through the earth. She went straight to the top of the mountain. Zhang Xiaohu didn't explain in detail, and Zhang Xiaohua didn't have a sense of direction. After searching for a long time, she still didn't find anything. Could it be that second brother said something wrong? Zhang Xiaohua was very puzzled. She didn't think about her mistake at all. All right, it's already late. I should go back first. If there's really no other way, I'll wait until tomorrow. Just as she was thinking, she heard someone whispering to her left. Could it be that it's that gang again? Why are they all night owls? Why do they always meet at night? Zhang Xiaohua naturally thought so, but when she quietly approached, she realized that she was wrong. A person laughed and said, "Senior Brother Mao, it's already so late. Why are you still loitering around?" I was wondering who it was. So it's Junior Brother Mu. Aren't you loitering around too? Yes, it's late at night. Even ghosts won't come. Other than us brothers who have been through hard times. Who else would appear at this time? Let's wait for a few more days. The brothers who rotate should be here. We can also go back to Lingering Fragrance Peak to rest. Maybe we don't need to come back this time. What? Where did you get the news from? Why does it sound like a rumor? It doesn't seem to be true. Senior Brother Mao is wrong. There's no smoke without fire. Since ancient times, this rumor has been quite close to the truth. What kind of truth did Junior Brother Mu get? Have you heard of it? Have you seen Oyen these few days? Oyen? No, she doesn't usually appear in the courtyard, does she? I haven't heard of it. Could it be that something happened to her? Although Oyen doesn't walk around the courtyard often, she still comes out to get some fresh air every few days. Don't you think that she hasn't appeared in the courtyard for 5 to 6 days? Now that you mention it, it's true. It's really a bit strange. Could it be? I heard that Oyen has a strange illness. She can't move while lying down. I reckon that she doesn't have much time left. Think about it. When she dies, do we still need to eat the northwest wind here? TSK, although Oyen can't be compared to our Lingering Fragrance Peak's inner disciples. She has a kind of delicate beauty. It's a pity that she's gone. Don't compare Oyen with our senior sisters. They all wear veils, so who knows if they're ugly or beautiful. Even when they see us, they order us around like servants. How can we be compared to Oyen's gentleness? Thinking of Oyen's smile and that sickly beauty, I have the urge to strangle all the senior sisters to death. Sho, what are you talking about? If the senior sisters hear this, do we still have a way to live? Oh, Yen has a strange illness? When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, he was shocked. He originally wanted to wait for a while before visiting Oyen, since the matter was urgent. Then he couldn't care about anything else. It was better to take a look first. As he thought about it, Zhang Xiaohua directly went into the courtyard in front of him. Looking down from the top of the mountain, the courtyard was rather huge. It took up a lot of space in Shixin Peak and was comparable to Baiyu Peak's Pill Expansion Hall. Of course, such a huge courtyard made it difficult for Zhang Xiaohua to find Oyen there. What should we do? Just as he was thinking, he heard a few servants coming from a dark corridor. Behind them was a middle-aged man who was carrying a food box. As he walked, he scolded, "Why aren't you moving? Miss O just wanted to come and eat some snacks from Pingyang City. If she loses her appetite after eating all of them, you will be held accountable." The few servants didn't dare to answer. They only carried the food in their hands and walked forward quickly. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, he was overjoyed and followed them silently. The few of them walked along the corridor and didn't stop when they passed by a few courtyards. Although there were lights in those courtyards, no one appeared. After following them for a while, he saw a courtyard planted with many bamboos. At the corner of the courtyard was a pond, and there was a small bridge over the pond that led to the corridor. The small bridge passed through the bamboo forest and went into the depths of the courtyard. There were faint lights and voices. At this point, Zhang Xiaohua had a rough idea of what to do. He went in from the side of the pond and revealed himself in the bamboo forest. When he leaped out of the bamboo forest, he saw a few houses in front of him and couldn't help but be stunned. -3. Chapter 736. In Zhang Xiaohua's mind, the fragrance cult must have placed Yen in a secluded hut when they brought her to Shixin Peak. Why would they worry about her? However, looking at the huge courtyard behind the Shixin Peak, which was not inferior to the Misty Hall, Zhang Xiaohua realized that he was too narrow-minded. He did not have the generous temperament and extravagance of the fragrant cult's hierarch. However, when he came out of the ground and flashed to a corner of the brightly lit courtyard, he was stunned on the spot. This isn't it the same as the courtyard where Yen used to discuss matters in the Huanxi Manor? Zhang Xiaohua had stayed in Huanxi Mountain Villa for a long time, but he rarely went to the inner courtyard where Yen lived. He had only seen the hall, so he had a deep impression of it. At this time, when he saw the trees, flowers, and other arrangements in the courtyard, he found that they were exactly the same as his impression. If it weren't for the fact that the trunk of the huge tree on the left side of the courtyard didn't have the trace of his chasing dream, he would have thought that everything in the courtyard was moved from Huanxi Mountain Villa. "Tut, tut!" Zhang Xiaohua smacked his dry lips and said to himself, "My goodness, I was wondering why so many people pursue power. This thing seems to be more useful than gold. If you ask me to spend money to build a courtyard that is exactly the same as Huanxi Mountain Villa, I won't do it. A futon is enough." But the hierarch just touched his lips, and the courtyard became exactly the same. It's really, alas, I don't know what to say. He. When second brother does something, will he also make the Misty Hall like Guozhuang House? Well, at the very least, he will build a small courtyard at the foot of the mountain for me, just like my home. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua seemed to understand the role of power and gradually began to look down on gold and silver. As the saying goes, the change of one's thoughts and the improvement of one's qualities only increase in the slightest. Zhang Xiaohua looked around the courtyard and then flew to the top of the huge tree with ease. He squinted his eyes and looked into the hall. At this moment, the hall was brightly lit, but there were only a few servants inside. They looked respectful and submissive. On one of the chairs in the hall sat an old man with a head full of silver hair. He was holding a teacup in his right hand and twirling it mindlessly. His eyes were looking at the ground, ignoring the teacup that wouldn't fall out of his hand no matter how hard he twirled it. His left sleeve was empty, casually tucked at his waist. Wasn't this Elder Yu, who taught Zhang Xiaohua the nameless sword art? Zhang Xiaohua looked at Elder Yu straight back and couldn't help but smile. This kind of old man who had been through storms in the pugilistic world was the most resilient. Huan, Shi Mountain Villa had encountered so many things, but it didn't affect him in the slightest. At this time, a woman walked in slowly from a corner of the courtyard. Her footsteps were slightly heavy and didn't seem to be someone who practiced martial arts. Zhang Xiaohua was even more delighted when he saw her. Under the light, the woman was close to 30 years old. Her mature face was slightly plump, and her eyes were slightly tired. There were also some fine wrinkles at the corners of her eyes, and there was a glow on her fair forehead. Wasn't she Chiu Tong, whom he hadn't seen for many years? If it was said that Zhang Xiaohua came to the back mountain of Shixin Peak to visit Oyen, it would be more accurate to say that he was here to visit Chiu Tong. When Zhang Xiaohua came to Pingyang City from the Guozhuang house, the first woman he met was Chiu Tong. Chiu Tong had selflessly taken on the responsibility of an elder sister. Not only did she bring Zhang Xiaohua to Huan Shi Mountain Villa, she had also helped him a lot in the villa. Most importantly, she had filled the void in Zhang Xiaohua's heart after he left his sister-in-law and mother. Therefore, other than kinship, Chiu Tong was really Zhang Xiaohua's Lu Qian. Now that he saw that Chiu Tong hadn't changed much from his impression of her, Zhang Xiaohua's heart was instantly filled with joy when he saw that Chiu Tong hadn't changed much. There were only traces of age and a mature charm. When Chiu Tong walked into the main hall, Elder Yu had already heard her footsteps and quickly stood up to welcome her. Just as he was about to say something, he saw the sadness in Chiu Tong's eyes and stopped. However, he was still a little unwilling and asked softly, Young mistress, how is she?" Chiu Tong sighed and didn't reply immediately. She looked at the servants in the hall and waved her hand. "All of you are dismissed." Those people all bowed and quietly walked down. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua had already reached the roof. When he saw Chiu Tong through his divine perception, he laughed in his heart. Elder sister Chiu Tong has the aura of a master. Back then, she was also like a servant. She wasn't as magnanimous as she is now. Gosh, Zhang Xiaohua actually knew how to criticize other people's aura. Furthermore, it was from a condescending point of view. Was this still the same country bumpkin that Chiu Tong had met back then? Seeing that everyone had left, Chiu Tong sat down dejectedly. She pinched the bridge of her nose between her eyes and rubbed it a few times. She smiled bitterly and said, "Elder Yu, young mistress, was awake for a while just now." She seemed to be in high spirits and wanted to eat some snacks from Pingyang City. We just sent some over, but she only ate a little before she fell into a trance again. She didn't recognize anyone and looked like she was in a daze. Now that she had taken some medicine, she fell asleep again. "Sai, how long has it been?" "The doctors from Lingering Fragrance Peak have also been here." "Why can't they see the reason? What method did they use?" "They tried all kinds of medicine. They even took quite a number of elixirs from Lingering Fragrance Peak. Why can't they see any effect? It's fine if she's just falling asleep. However, young mistress's spirit is getting weaker and weaker. Even the doctors from Lingering Fragrance Peak said that if this continues, young mistress may never wake up again." Chiu Tong said sadly. However, there were tears in the corners of her eyes. She had served Yen since she was young. Although they were master and servant, they were sisters. Otherwise, she wouldn't have followed Yen to the Lingering Fragrance sect to suffer. Now that she saw that Yen was dying, how could she not be sad? Elder Yu frowned. He slammed the table with his right hand, causing the teacup to fall to the ground. He shouted, "Isn't it obvious? It must be those old ladies from Lingering Fragrance Peak. Other than them, who else would make things difficult for young mistress? I already said that I would go to Lingering Fragrance Peak to reason with them. However, you just had to stop me. Now, we don't even know if young mistress is dead or alive. Who can we reason with?" Chiu Tong got up and walked over. She bent down to pick up the teacup that had fallen to the ground and placed it gently on the table. Elder Yu was a little embarrassed. He said, "Chiu Tong, Let the servants do this. Chiao Tong shook her head and said softly, Elder Yu, I'm young mistress's servant. If I don't do this, who will do it? Elder Yu stomped his feet. He was angry, but he couldn't vent it. He sat back down in his chair. Chiao Tong looked at Elder Yu and said softly, Elder Yu, what you said doesn't have any basis. Although I have the same suspicions, there's no proof. Lingering fragrance, Peak, won't admit it. After thinking for a while, she said, Moreover, if lingering fragrance, Peak, wants to kill young mistress, they don't have to go through so much trouble. They only need to send an inner sect expert to point at her, not to mention young mistress. Even Elder Yu wouldn't be able to resist. Sigh. Elder Yu sighed and said dejectedly, What you said makes sense. This old man has roamed the Jianghu for decades and always felt that I have seen countless heroes. I know the depths of the Jianghu. Even when I came to Huanxi Manor, this old man also underestimated the people from the Misty School. I only felt that I was standing at a certain level of martial arts and looked at everyone as normal. When this old man followed young mistress to Lingering Fragrance Peak, I thought that with my martial arts I would be able to protect young mistress. However, when I came here I realized that when Lingering Fragrance Peak destroyed the Misty School that day, they only used outer sect disciples and a few inner sect male disciples. Not a single elite inner sect female disciple went. It was only after I unintentionally witnessed the inner sect disciples' martial arts that this old man realized that there is always someone better than you. This old man's martial arts are really not up to their standards. What protection is there to talk about? Elder Yu, you don't have to feel inferior. The circumstances of the inner sect disciples are different from yours. If you were to have such a fortuitous encounter, you would definitely be stronger than them. Lass, you don't know this, but the path of martial arts is about fate. This fate is also an extremely important thing. There are countless people with extraordinary talents in this world, but how many of them can be discovered by others? How many of them can enter the ranks of martial arts? And out of these people, how many of them can meet a master, a suitable inner sect cultivation method, a suitable sword technique, or a suitable weapon? When it came to martial arts, Elder Yu had a lot to say. Chiao Tong didn't disturb him, and only sat at the side to listen quietly. Zhang Xiaohua leaned over the roof and laughed in her heart. It said that when people get old, they like to reminisce about their past achievements. It seems like Elder Yu is no exception. After talking for the time it took to brew a cup of tea, Elder Yu said, This old man was also lucky and obtained the nameless sword technique by chance. It was from that sword technique that I was enlightened and understood the true essence of sword techniques. As he said that, he seemed to be thirsty and reached out to grab his teacup. Only then did he realize that the teacup had been broken by him. He stopped and realized that he had said too much. He smiled embarrassedly and said, I said too much, I said too much. Chiao Tong pursed her lips and smiled. She poured tea into a teacup and handed it to Elder Yu. She said, Since Elder Yu knows that the inner sect disciples of Lingering Fragrance Peak are amazing, it would be easy for them to deal with us. Moreover, Shixin Peak is the territory of Lingering Fragrance Cult. No one in the pugilistic world would know about it. If something happened, they could just say that the young mistress got sick. Why would they need to resort to other methods? Elder Yu said, You're right. If they wanted to do it, they would have done it a few years ago. Why wait until now? Moreover, the words Misty School no longer exist in the pugilistic world. The young mistress value is getting smaller and smaller. There's no need for them to do it now. Chiao Tong shook her head. Value is getting smaller? That's not necessarily true. -3. Chapter 737. Elder Yu asked curiously, Is there something wrong with what I said? Chiao Tong smiled. Hall Master Yang is overseeing the front mountain of First Faith Peak. Although she is the wife of sect leader O, don't forget that she is also an inner disciple of the fragrant cult. This identity will inevitably make the disciples of the Misty School feel conflicted. Yes, This Yang Ruping really doesn't have it easy. I didn't even know that she was a disciple of the fragrant cult after being in the Misty Mountain Villa for decades. Now that she is at First Faith Peak, she can still endure the humiliation and protect the disciples of the Misty School. Hall Master Yang is merely the wife of Gang Leader O, while Young Miss is the younger sister of Gang Leader O. She is much more important than Hall Master Yang. Therefore, as long as the Misty Hall is not closed down, Young Miss value will not decrease. Chiao Tong then hesitated. Actually, I feel that the fragrant cult's purpose in imprisoning Young Miss here is far from just that. Elder Yu didn't understand and asked curiously, "Is there another reason?" Chiao Tong was also puzzled by Elder Yu's question and asked, "Didn't the disciples of the fragrant cult ask you about it?" Of course, this old man is considered a top figure in the pugilistic world. Even if I haven't seen them, how could I not have heard of them? I only need to tell them my name and they will know the whole story. Why bother to ask? Chiao Tong nodded and said thoughtfully, "I understand now. But didn't they ask about anything else?" "Anything else? Of course. It's just a matter related to the young Mississippi. I'm just an old man. What could I know? Naturally, I'll tell them everything I know." Seeing my attitude, they didn't ask any more questions. "Girl, why don't you tell me what's going on? We have been here for so many years, and you still seem to be hiding it from me." Chiao Tong smiled bitterly at Elder Yu's questioning words. "It's not that I am hiding it from Elder Yu. Actually, Young Miss is also puzzled and doesn't know what they're talking about. What do you want me to tell you? It's all groundless speculation. Is it related to some martial arts secret manual?" Nodding, Chiao Tong said, "Whether or not it's done is just a groundless accusation. In any case, the Misty School was destroyed because of this incident." Then he hesitated again and continued, "However, it's not a martial arts secret manual like what people say." Zhang Xiaohua, who was lying on the roof, immediately understood what was going on. "That's right. Doesn't the Aroma sect have any cultivation techniques? Even Su Huan mantra was casually bestowed to a disciple, like second brother. How could he possibly covet the martial arts manuals of the Misty School? Then what exactly is?" Elder Yu was indeed worthy of being the one who had taught Zhang Xiaohua swordsmanship. He immediately answered the question that Zhang Xiaohua wanted to ask. This was the third time Chiao Tong hesitated. However, after thinking for a moment, she still said, "Even Young Miss was kept in the dark from the start. I heard that the alliance leader of the Righteous Alliance at the Misty Peak interrogated Young Miss, saying that sect leader O had given Young Miss something. However, sect leader O didn't give Young Miss anything noteworthy. Later on, I heard from the inner sect disciples that it was some sort of map. In all honesty, how could Master O have given such an important item to someone who doesn't know martial arts like Young Miss?" Elder Yu's eyes lit up. "A treasure map? A treasure map that contains a peerless martial art? How is that possible?" Chiao Tong shook her head slightly. "I don't know how rich the Fragrant Order is. I heard you say that their martial arts are very high. They only need to pass down their martial arts. Isn't that better than anything else?" Elder Yu smiled. "You're just inexperienced. What do you think is better, being the leader of the Aroma sect or unifying the martial arts world and becoming the leader of all the sects in the martial arts world?" Chiao Tong was dumbfounded. "This, I don't know." Elder Yu reprimanded her. "You're a rotten wood that can't be carved. Why don't you have any ambition? Stop, Elder Yu. You don't have to say so much. If this map could be used to unify the martial arts world, wouldn't Master O have done it long ago? Why wait until the sect was destroyed by the three sects? I'm just casually chatting with you, and you're already lecturing me? Hee, you seem to have forgotten that I taught you a lot back at Huanshu Manor. Even Young Miss had to listen to me obediently the moment the topic touched on Oyen. The atmosphere in the hall immediately turned heavy. Elder Yu couldn't continue his words and could only mutter, after talking for so long, since it wasn't Ling Xiang Peak who did it, how could Ling Xiang Peak's physicians not be able to treat her? Could it be There's another reason behind this. Elder Yu and Chiu Tong glanced at each other at the same time with a trace of shock in their eyes. If that was really the case, then the aroma sect wasn't an iron plate. There were actually people who disagreed with the sect master and disobeyed the sect master's orders. Then, wasn't this person, Elder Yu and Chiu Tong shuddered. Even Zhang Xiaohua, who was listening carefully from the roof, was shocked. If that was the case, everyone in the Misty Hall was under Yang Rupiang's protection, and Yang Rupiang was under the sect master's protection. If there was really such a person, wouldn't the Misty Hall's days be even more difficult? Perhaps Zhong Pei, who dares to brazenly torture second brother with groundless accusations, belongs to such a force. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was letting her imagination run wild, Chiu Tong stood up and said, "Sai, no matter what they do, it's fine as long as it has nothing to do with us. Look at young Miss now, she's all skin and bones. If it's delayed for a few more days, it's hard to say what will happen. Is it that serious?" Elder Yu also stood up and said, "This old man has to go take a look," Chiu Tong hurriedly said. "Elder, quickly go and rest. What time is it now? Why are you still going to young Miss's room?" Elder Yu glared at him. "Young Miss is just like my granddaughter. What's so inconvenient about me going there? Moreover, when you were young," seeing that Elder Yu was about to use his seniority again, Chiu Tong hurriedly begged for mercy. "Elder Yu, young Miss is already asleep. Don't you feel embarrassed to go there? Let's wait until tomorrow." "Didn't you say that young Miss?" Chiu Tong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "That won't make a difference. Elder, you should rest first. If there are any changes, I will definitely inform you." After speaking, Chiu Tong hurriedly left the hall and walked into the darkness outside. Elder Yu, who was standing in the hall, let out a long sigh. He sat down again and habitually picked up a teacup to drink. However, the teacup was empty. He shook his hand and threw it on the table, almost breaking it. Although Elder Yu was skilled in martial arts, the fact that Zhang Xiaohua flew up from the roof and followed Chiu Tong did not catch his attention at all. After Chiu Tong left the hall, she turned around and walked to the right. It was the same path she had taken earlier. There was a small moon door and a small stone path beneath her feet. Zhang Xiaohua knew that there were disciples from Lingering Fragrance Peak watching the courtyard, so she didn't dare to reveal herself. She carefully floated down from the roof and immediately burrowed into the ground to follow Chiu Tong. After Chiu Tong passed through the moon gate, she walked past several bamboo racks that were covered with green vines. She subconsciously stopped in her tracks and raised her head to look. She saw a bright, full moon hanging in the sky. The moonlight scattered on the ground like water, as if it was bathing in a river of stars. Chiu Tong looked around and walked to a clean spot. Looking at the boundless starry sky, she clasped her hands together and knelt down without hesitation. She whispered something as hot tears flowed down from the corners of her eyes. Although he didn't hear what Chiu Tong was saying or praying, Zhang Xiaohua felt a pang in his heart when he saw Chiu Tong's pious expression under the moonlight and her tightly knitted brows. He thought to himself, if elder sister-in-law and mother were in trouble, would I just stand by and do nothing? The person who is in trouble is someone who I am indebted to in the past. The answer was obvious. Zhang Xiaohua had always been someone who knew how to repay kindness. Although he didn't intend to expose himself this time and only wanted to see Chiu Tong and Oyan and secretly check on Oyan's condition, he couldn't bear to see Chiu Tong treat Yu Qiuqian in such a manner. He formed a hand seal and floated up from the ground. He quietly stood under the shadows of the green vines and looked at Chiu Tong with pity. After a long while, Chiu Tong stood up from the ground and wiped the tears from her face. Just as she was about to walk away, she heard a voice beside her call out, "Elder Sister Chiu Tong, ah?" The voice wasn't loud, but it gave Chiu Tong a fright. She naturally jumped to the side and asked in a trembling voice, "Who are you? Why didn't you rest earlier? What are you doing here?" However, Chiu Tong was standing under the moonlight and Zhang Xiaohua was in the shadows. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't see who it was. Therefore, she didn't waste any time and said, Didn't I tell you that no one is allowed to enter without my permission? Go back and pretend that I didn't see anything. There are still many things to do tomorrow." Zhang Xiaohua laughed inwardly. Qiu Tong must have thought of him as a servant. However, when he heard Qiu Tong's kindness, he couldn't help but feel warmth in his heart. He smiled and said, "It's me, Zhang Xiaohua, elder sister Qiu Tong. Don't you remember me?" As he said that, Zhang Xiaohua took half a step forward. The moonlight shone on half of his face. "Zhang Xiaohua." Qiu Tong covered her mouth in shock. She looked at the face under the moonlight in disbelief. It didn't seem to have changed much from the past few days. However, when she looked at Zhang Xiaohua, who was a head taller than her reaction was the same as Qiu Ju's. You're really Zhang Xiaohua? I heard from your second brother that you were captured by the Tenri sect? No wonder both of you have the surname Qiu." Zhang Xiaohua thought to himself as he pinched his nose. Then he smiled and said, "Didn't I escape from their hands?" However, Qiu Tong still didn't go forward. She hesitated and said, "But why are you here? Did the Archbishop of Lingering Fragrance, Peak, send you here?" Then he laughed coldly and said, "Miss has already been tortured to such a state by you, and you still want to play this game." -3. Chapter 738. After hearing Qiu Tong's question, Zhang Xiaohua immediately understood. Needless to say, Qiu Tong thought that she was a fake Zhang Xiaohua sent by the fragrance cult. However, thinking about it carefully, it was quite normal. The Shixin Peak was different from the Huanxi mountain villa. When Qiu Ju saw Zhang Xiaohua, she was just stunned at first. She immediately understood and did not delve into it. After all, Zhang Xiaohua was the medicine boy of the Huanxi mountain villa. With martial arts, it was normal for him to easily enter the Huanxi mountain villa to find Qiu Ju and ask about Oyen. What about Shixin Peak? Other than the people from the fragrance cult, it was unlikely that anyone in Jianghu could easily come here. In Qiu Tong's eyes, who was Zhang Xiaohua? She was just like her younger brother, who worked at home. Even if she heard from Zhang Xiaohu, Oyen, and even Qiu Tong had seen Zhang Xiaohua before, how could Qiu Tong, who had seen the mystical martial arts of the inner disciples of Lingering Fragrance Peak, believe that Zhang Xiaohua, who even he Tianshu from the pharmacy hall could not defeat, could sneak up on her in the middle of the night under the guard of the disciples of Lingering Fragrance Peak? In short, this was simply impossible. Well, if you want to pretend, you should at least make it look more real. You are using someone else's face from a few years ago in front of me. Aren't you bullying me for being stupid? Who would not see each other for 4 to 5 years and not change their appearance at all, especially when it was a teenager. Seeing Qiu Tong's reaction, Zhang Xiaohua thought about it carefully. This was where the loophole was. She could not explain it, even if she had 100 mouths. Really, she could not explain it. She said to Qiu Tong, "Sister Qiu Tong, the first time I saw you was to help you get back your money bag. Sister Qiu Tong, the reason why I could enter Huanxi Manor seems to be because you saw me at the Lotus Escort Agency. Sister Qiu Tong, I saved Manor Head by the river. I also killed an old man in black. No matter how many times you say these words, it would not be enough to prove your identity." After all, Zhang Xiaohua did not help Qiu Tong dry her underwear. Zhang Xiaohua scratched her head and said, "Big Sister Qiu Tong, do you think I need to pretend to be myself?" Qiu Tong almost burst out laughing when she heard that. She thought for a moment and said, "That's true. Zhang Xiaohua was just an ordinary medicine apprentice. When the Misty School was destroyed, she had already disappeared. I don't think the fragrance cult knew of her existence. Moreover, even if this Zhang Xiaohua was impersonated by someone from the fragrant cult, why did you have to impersonate someone who has nothing to do with the young miss?" When Qiu Tong thought of this, she couldn't help but shudder. Zhang Xiaohua saved Miss before. Although this is a secret, there's no guarantee that no one will know about it. If someone from the fragrant religion uses it and impersonates Zhang Xiaohua, it's not necessarily true. Just as she was about to relax, she immediately became alert again. Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment. It seemed like there was no secret that only the two of them knew. She could only smile bitterly and say, "Big Sister Chiu Tong, I don't think I can think of anything to prove my identity. Do you want to think about it too?" Chiu Tong thought for a moment and suddenly thought of something fun. She asked, "Do you remember the banknotes that the young miss gave you? How much silver do you remember? How many banknotes were there?" Zhang Xiaohua's eyes lit up, but then her face turned red. She smiled and said, "I'm glad that big sister Chiu Tong still remembers. It was 5 taels for 1 banknote. There were 40 banknotes. Manor Head even gave me 100 taels for 1 banknote. Is there a problem? Big sister Chiu Tong, I remember that you lied to me and said it was 1 tael for 1 banknote." Chiu Tong was slightly shocked. "Zhang Xiaohua, is it really you?" That's right, if she didn't see it with her own eyes. How could she remember that 2,000 taels worth of banknotes were exchanged for 5 taels for 1 banknote? Perhaps only Zhang Xiaohua, who had just come out of the Guozhuang house and had never seen the world before, would do such a thing. "Of course it's me," Zhang Xiaohua said righteously. It was best not to spread such a shameful thing. However, Zhang Xiaohua immediately thought of something. She took out Chasing Dream and handed it over. "Big sister Chiu Tong, this is my little sword. I remember that you were there when you asked me about it at Huanxi Manor. You should have seen it too. I even used it to stab a tree." Chiu Tong nodded and walked forward to take it. Zhang Xiaohua hesitated and handed it over to Chiu Tong before taking half a step back. When Chasing Dream entered Chiu Tong's hand, it sank and was held by Chiu Tong. She took a closer look at it before handing it over to Zhang Xiaohua. "It should be around that time. I don't remember it clearly, but it should be around 5 taels worth of banknotes." "Oh, right. Why did you come to Shixin Peak?" "Oh, your second brother is still in front. You should have seen him already." Chiu Tong's words were also probing. Zhang Xiaohua nodded. "Yes, isn't it just Zhang Xiaohu? Big sister Chiu Tong, you don't have to probe." Chiu Tong pursed her lips and smiled. Zhang Xiaohua continued, "I came here to spread the incense cult to look for second brother. I know that you and big sister O's lives are not important, but second brother's life is unpredictable. That's why I went through so much trouble to come here. As for how I came in, let's talk about it later. I heard you say to Elder You that big sister O is very sick? You were eavesdropping." Zhang Xiaohua scratched her head. "You were talking when I came in. I didn't want to disturb you, so I just happened to listen in." "No, what I mean is that Elder You didn't realize that you were eavesdropping outside." Hee. Zhang Xiaohua rubbed her nose and continued to smile. "It's enough that you know this. Don't tell Elder You. It'll be very embarrassing for him." Chiu Tong laughed. I won't tell him." Then she passed the small sword to Zhang Xiaohua and said with a frown, "You must have heard it just now. Young Mrs. Illness is very serious." Zhang Xiaohua comforted her. "Big sister O has always been very nice to people. Good people will naturally be rewarded. It's fine. Let me take a look at her later. We'll talk about it later. You?" Chiu Tong didn't expect Zhang Xiaohua's last sentence to be like this. She asked, "Zhang Xiaohua, when did you learn how to treat people?" Zhang Xiaohua laughed. "I learned it at Rejuvenation Valley." You went to Rejuvenation Valley? Young Miss seemed to want to go there back then. You actually went there and even learned medical skills? However, it's only been a few years. What can you learn? It can't be that the doctors at Lingering Fragrance Peak are inferior to you, right? Gosh, big sister Chiu Tong, when did you become so slow? Weren't you rushing back to see big sister just now? Why are you so quiet now? You're just talking to me. Isn't that so? Chiu Tong slapped her forehead. What am I talking to you about? Even if you're a fake, so what? Anyway, this manor is your fragrant fragrance cult's territory. You can come and go as you please. Chiu Tong turned around and walked 2 steps. She subconsciously turned back and asked, "Zhang Xiaohua, do you really know how to treat people?" Zhang Xiaohua nodded affirmatively. I do. However, I haven't seen Big Sister O's condition yet. I can't answer you. Then come with me. Chiu Tong was seriously ill and was begging for help. Zhang Xiaohua didn't move. She whispered, You go first. I'll follow behind you. If we get too close, I'm afraid that the disciples at Lingering Fragrance Peak will see us. Chiu Tong nodded and turned around slowly. However, her attention was focused behind her. I don't see Zhang Xiaohua's figure. Could it be that his qigong is so high? That's right. Since Elder Yu doesn't know that he's eavesdropping outside, his qigong should be pretty good. I think I heard him say that sect leader bestowed some qigong technique on him. It shouldn't be wrong. Chiu Tong thought as she walked forward. She also looked back discreetly. However, when she arrived at a secluded courtyard, she still didn't see any trace of Zhang Xiaohua. Where did that brat go? In the small courtyard, there were a few servants who were also dispirited. They leaned against the door and were talking about something. When they saw Chiu Tong come in, they quickly perked up. Chiu Tong asked, How is Miss? There's no change. She's still unconscious. There's no movement at all. Sigh, all of you are dismissed. I'll be on duty tonight. But Big Sister Chiu Tong, you've been on duty since last night. Will you be able to endure it today? It's fine. All of you are dismissed. Chiu Tong waved her hand and turned to enter the house. The maidservants looked at each other, then left helplessly and went their separate ways. Chiu Tong entered the house. She wasn't in a hurry to go in. Instead, she looked back and waited for the servants to leave. She waited for a while, but still didn't see anyone. She couldn't help but wonder, did Zhang Xiaohua get lost? Why isn't he here yet? Before she could finish her sentence, she heard a lazy voice behind her. Big Sister Chiu Tong, are you looking for me? You. Chiu Tong jumped in fright. She quickly turned around and saw Zhang Xiaohua sitting on a chair next to her, looking at her with a smile. Chiu Tong quickly walked to the door and closed it. She scolded jokingly, You child, of all things you learn to scare people. You even learn to speak lazily like other people. Do you think it's fun? Is that so? Zhang Xiaohua tried to say a few more words. She said, That seems to be the case. I really didn't learn to speak like other people. When Chiu Tong saw this, it was as if she was looking at the ignorant youth from years ago. She thought of her younger brother, who she hadn't seen for many years. She shook her head dotingly and said, I don't care to talk to you. Wait here. I'll go in and see young Mississippi after a while. Chiu Tong returned and said, Zhang Xiaohua, go in and see. I hope you have a good way to cure young Miss' illness. Okay. Zhang Xiaohua stood up and followed Chiu Tong into the small room next to them. It was a very simple room. There weren't many things, but there were many books. There was no smell of cosmetics at all. It was completely different from what Zhang Xiaohua had imagined. When Zhang Xiaohua's gaze landed on Oyen, who was unconscious on the bed, her heart ached. Back when Zhang Xiaohua first met Oyen was about the same age as Lu Qian. She was at the peak of her beauty. There was no need to talk about the charm of her movements. Even her face, which was like a full moon, and her curved eyes were filled with boundless charm. However, at this moment, her face was so thin that it looked like a melon seed. -3. Chapter 739. Oh, Ian was lying on her back on the bed. Her black hair covered a little of her face. She was so thin that her face looked like it was hanging on a plate, but it was still white and flawless. Her long and narrow eyes were tightly shut, showing that her eye sockets were a little sunken. It was obvious that she was worried, and the sunken eye sockets made her dark eyelashes look even longer. Coupled with her fair skin, it was another kind of morbid beauty. Zhang Xiaohua looked at this face that was completely different from the one she remembered. Her eyes couldn't help but moisten. Yes, this was a high and mighty woman. She was the younger sister of a sect master and also the head of a manor. However, she was so amiable. When she saw Zhang Xiaohua, who had just come from the countryside, she didn't look down on her disdain or distance. Instead, she treated her as an equal and even lent her a book on medicinal herbs. This kind of equal treatment really comforted Zhang Xiaohua's slightly inferior heart. Just like Qiu Tong, she gave Zhang Xiaohua a motherly love. "Young miss, how is it?" Qiu Tong saw that Zhang Xiaohua was in a daze and couldn't help but ask anxiously. Zhang Xiaohua came to her senses and forced a smile. "Don't worry, big sister Qiu Tong. I will do my best to treat big sister O." Sigh. When she heard Zhang Xiaohua's words, Qiu Tong seemed to hear the guilt in her voice. She let out a long sigh and didn't say anything else. Zhang Xiaohua looked at Oyen and picked up a stool to sit in front of the bed. She narrowed her eyes and carefully looked at Oyen's face. She had only taken a rough look, but now that she took a closer look, she felt that Oyen's face was covered in a faint layer of green. Following that, Zhang Xiaohua's eyes twitched. She narrowed her eyes and released her divine sense. The moment she did so, Zhang Xiaohua's expression changed drastically. Do you know why? Before Zhang Xiaohua left the Guozhuang house, when Lu Qian was still taking care of the injured Zhang Xiaolong in the Guozhuang house, Zhang Xiaohua told Lu Qian that he could feel his grandmother's vitality gradually fading away. Lu Qian thought that it was because of the blood connection. Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand it himself. It wasn't until Zhang Xiaohua comprehended the heavenly Tao that he had a certain foundation. After several opportunities, he had a deep impact on the Tao of life and death. Now, although his divine sense couldn't reach far, he had some special magical abilities. For example, right now he could clearly feel that Oyan's life force was slowly but steadily slipping away. When she saw Zhang Xiaohua's expression change drastically, Qiu Tong, who'd been paying attention from the side, was stunned as well, and she said, "Zhang Xiaohua, could it be that you noticed something? You haven't taken her pulse yet, right?" Sighing softly, Zhang Xiaohua's lips curled up, and he said, "I'm just wondering why Sister O is so skinny. Isn't the fragrance cult's leader a little too stingy?" Uft. Qiu Tong couldn't help but laugh, even though she knew Zhang Xiaohua was spouting nonsense. She then rebuked, "Hurry up and take her pulse. When she recovers, she'll make you something nice to eat." Qiu Tong seemed to remember that Zhang Xiaohua liked to eat meat. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Sister Qiu Tong, you keep asking me to take her pulse. Why don't you take out Sister O's arm? If you want me to personally take it out from under her blanket, wouldn't that be blasphemy?" Qiu Tong slapped her forehead and said, "Look at me, I'm getting dizzy." As she spoke, she stepped forward and carefully took O Yan's arm out from under the blanket, seeing that her wrist was already skin and bones. Zhang Xiaohua's heart ached. She then carefully placed 2 fingers on O Yan's pulse and listened carefully. After a while, she sent her vital energy into O Yan's meridians. O Yan's meridians were small and fragile, which was the main reason why she couldn't practice martial arts. However, Zhang Xiaohua circulated her vital energy and didn't find any abnormalities. All the major acupoints on O Yan's body were normal, and her internal organs were normal as well. However, due to the knot in her heart for a long time, there was some sedimentation in her heart meridians. O Yan was still young, and it wasn't obvious yet. When she was old, there might be major problems. However, this wasn't what Zhang Xiaohua was looking for today. Just as Qiu Tong said, the doctors at Lingering Fragrance Peak couldn't find out what illness Oyen was suffering from. Zhang Xiaohua didn't believe it. His medical skills were praised by Valley Master Nia in Rejuvenation Valley, especially when he was dealing with difficult illnesses. Hence, he used his vital energy to check Oyen's meridians again and again. However, he still couldn't find any abnormalities. In the end, Zhang Xiaohua put down her hand and said apologetically to Qiu Tong, "Elder sister Qiu Tong, I was too full of myself earlier. I really didn't find anything wrong with elder sister O's illness." Qiu Tong was a little disappointed, but it wasn't out of her expectations. She forced a smile and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, you're already doing well. The doctors at Lingering Fragrance Peak said the same thing." Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat when she heard that. She asked, "What else did the doctors say?" They didn't say much. They just said that young lady might be suffering from heart blockage and fatigue, which caused her to be mentally sluggish, and she fell into a deep sleep. Didn't elder sister wake up for a while in the afternoon? How did the doctors deal with her? The doctors said that they weren't confident and only left behind a few awakening pills from lingering fragrance peak for young lady to take and see if there would be any effect. After she left, I fed one to young mistress. It was still useful. Not long after, young mistress woke up and wanted to eat some snacks from Pingyang City. However, she only ate a little before falling asleep again. It was the same as before. I was thinking of giving young lady another pill tomorrow morning to see if there would be any effect. Awakening pill. Zhang Xiaohua was taken aback. The pill formula of this awakening pill was recorded in the jade slip he had obtained from the pill room of the Tianmu Peak. However, he had not paid much attention to the use of this pill. Usually, he would not hear the disciples of the Pill Tower Hall mention it. He thought that it was an ordinary pill. "Can I take a look?" Zhang Xiaohua asked. Of course. Qiu Tong turned around and picked up a jade bottle from the table. She poured out a pill. Zhang Xiaohua took it and looked at it carefully. It was a pill the size of a soybean. It wasn't perfectly round and was dark green in color. Before Zhang Xiaohua could bring it to her nose, a refreshing smell that was different from the usual pill fragrance rushed to her nose. Thin mint herb? Zhang Xiaohua nodded slightly. This thin mint herb had a unique smell and a refreshing smell. It was most suitable for waking up and cleansing the mind. However, this awakening pill smelled so pungent for two reasons. Firstly, the thin mint herb used must have been young. The older the thin mint herb was, the fainter the pungent smell. In the end, there was only a lingering coolness left. Secondly, there was a mistake in the refining method. It didn't capture the essence of the way of the immortals, not to mention whether the essence of the thin mint herb could be combined with other supplementary herbs to produce an effect. The pungent smell had already dissipated much of the medicinal effect. Could this awakening pill be effective for Oyan's illness? If that's the case, perhaps the pill I refined can save Oyan's life? Zhang Xiaohua thought to herself. She then handed the awakening pill to Qiu Tong. After thinking for a while, she said, "Sister Qiu Tong, keep this awakening pill. When you give it to Miss tomorrow, let me take a look. Perhaps I can see its effects." Qiu Tong kept the pill and nodded. "Tomorrow. I hope this awakening pill will be useful." Then she suddenly realized something. "Where can I find you tomorrow?" Zhang Xiaohua laughed. "I'm now in the Misty Hall in the Front Mountain. I'm a disciple on duty from the Pill Expanding Hall. However, it's not convenient for you to find me. I'll do it myself." She then looked at the full moon in the sky and said, "But it's already late. I'll have to nag you all night." Qiu Tong was stunned. There are many rooms in this manor, but it's too late to pack them up. Moreover, there are many spies in the incense cult. You don't want others to know, right? Zhang Xiaohua nodded. "It's fine. Just find me a place. If it's not convenient here, I'll just find a cave on the mountain. There's no need for that. Come with me." With that, she led Zhang Xiaohua out. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly said, "You don't have to go out. Just tell me where it is, and I'll go there myself." "I see." Qiu Tong thought for a while and said, "This courtyard is empty. There aren't many people there. If you're brave enough, you can go there and stay for a night." "All right. I'll come over first thing in the morning. Don't let the servants come over." With that, Zhang Xiaohua went out and made a hand seal. Without waiting for Qiu Tong to come out, she went straight to the backyard. When Qiu Tong came out, Zhang Xiaohua was long gone. It was like a dream. She couldn't help but believe that the country youth of the past was no longer someone she could see through. Just as Qiu Tong said, no one came to the backyard. It was rather dusty. Zhang Xiaohua went in and found a random room. She took out a praying mat and sat down cross-legged. Then she set up a restriction. Not long after, She fell into her daily slumber. The night passed uneventfully. The next morning, Zhang Xiaohua first finished her homework. Seeing that it was still early, she sat on the praying mat and carefully considered Yan's condition. Yan's condition was really strange. Even in Rejuvenation Valley, she had never heard Mu Qingxian talk about such a case. It made her feel like she didn't know where to start. After thinking for a while, she didn't have any ideas. Zhang Xiaohua could only take out the pill formula that recorded the Spirit Awakening Pill and read it carefully. The Spirit Awakening Pill was refined using the same method as the Yuhuandan pill. It was also refined using the two main ingredients, lotus grass and clear eucalyptus fruit, along with a dozen other supplementary ingredients. The lotus grass and clear eucalyptus fruit weren't considered rare compared to the ice soul grass. Even the mystic birch forest had plenty of them. Zhang Xiaohua didn't take long to prepare all the herbs needed to refine the Spirit Awakening Pill. She placed them in the coin pouch. After preparing everything, Zhang Xiaohua put away the praying mat and turned around to return to Yan's room. Qiu Tong was anxiously pacing left and right. When she saw Zhang Xiaohua suddenly appear, she couldn't help but jump in fright. -3. Chapter 740. What kind of lightness skill is that? Qiu Tong was shocked and blurted out, "Ethereal steps." Zhang Xiaohua blurted out with a smile, "Isn't that the lightness skill that sect leader bestowed upon me years ago?" Qiu Tong was enlightened. "You're really something. It's only been a few years since we last met, but you've already mastered the Misty School's lightness skill to such a high level. I feel that even elder you can't compare to you. If sect leader sees this, he'll definitely be overjoyed." Zhang Xiaohua pursed her lips when she heard this. She knew her own situation. If Peng were to find out about this technique, how would she survive? Zhang Xiaohua also knew that as the leader of a sect, Peng would definitely prioritize the sect's interests. She was just a country bumpkin with no background. Either she obediently cooperated with him, or she would lose her life. Of course, Peng should be considered a good person. He would probably pay a corresponding price in exchange for her help. Qiu Tong's face was a little gloomy and listless as she said this. Zhang Xiaohua smiled when she saw this. "Don't think too much, Sister Qiu Tong. Who knows when the Misty School will be re-established in Pingyang City. Let's hurry and treat Mississippi. If Miss doesn't attend the ceremony on the day of reorganizing the mountains and rivers, it will be much worse." "That's right." Qiu Tong wiped her eyes and said, "Miss also talks about reorganizing the Misty School every day. Otherwise, she wouldn't be so tired and even contracted such a strange illness." With that, she led Zhang Xiaohua into the eastern room. Everything in the room was the same as last night. Even Yan's sleeping posture had changed slightly. Only the pale green color on Yan's face had deepened. Qiu Tong took out the awakening pill and was about to feed it to Yan when Zhang Xiaohua suddenly said, "Sister Qiu Tong, let me do it." Qiu Tong looked at Zhang Xiaohua and nodded. She poured out a sobering pill and handed it to Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohu carefully examined the Spirit Awakening Pill before placing it into Yan's mouth, following which he placed his finger on Yan's pulse and channeled his true energy into her body. He activated his true energy to dissolve the Spirit Awakening Pill, while his divine sense enveloped Yan. Sure enough, the Spirit Awakening Pill had some effect. Not long after, when the pill dissolved, although Zhang Xiaohua's Jinqi didn't detect any special changes in Yan's meridians, heart meridians, and internal organs, the disappearing vitality in her divine sense obviously slowed down. Although it couldn't stop, it was enough for Zhang Xiaohua to see Yan's slightly moving eyes and trembling eyelashes. "Miss." Qiu Tong saw Yan move and said in surprise, "You're awake?" "Mississippi." Yan opened her eyes tiredly and saw Zhang Xiaohua immediately. She couldn't help but exclaim in surprise, "Zhang Xiaohua!" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. It seemed that other than her mother, No one else could recognize her so easily. Her heart warmed as she nodded and said, "It's me, Mississippi. You're awake?" "Yes, I'm awake." Why are you in my room? Did He Tian Chu give you a day off today? Or is there something you need from me?" Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua completely understood. Like I said, only mother can recognize me at once. Even elder brother, elder sister-in-law, and father are hesitant. How could Yan have such a deep impression of me? It turns out that she thought she was in Huanxi Mountain Villa. Chiu Tong walked over and said, "Miss this." Before Chiu Tong could finish speaking, Yan frowned and said, "Are you Chiu Tong? Why do you seem to have aged so much in just one night?" When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she stood up from the chair. Yan was even more surprised. She pointed at Zhang Xiaohua and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, when did you grow so tall?" Miss. Chiu Tong quickly walked forward and sat beside Yan. "You must be a little confused from sleeping. Look at the things in this room." When Yan heard this, she looked around and then at the bed. She composed herself and smiled bitterly. "So we're not at Huanxi Manor." But then she pointed at Zhang Xiaohua and asked, "Who is this person? Why does she look exactly like Zhang Xiaohua from a few years ago?" Chiu Tong said, "She is Zhang Xiaohua from back then. I don't know what happened. She's actually acting so young. You don't have to doubt it. I already confirmed last night that she's the real Zhang Xiaohua." When Yan saw Chiu Tong's assurance, she did not pursue the matter. She only said, "Zhang Xiaohua, why are you here?" When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she bowed and said, "Big sister, now is not the time to ask me. I know you can't stay awake for long. I know a little about the art of medicine, so I wanted to ask you some questions." Yan was interested. She said, "Am I sick?" "I just feel very tired and want to sleep. It's probably because I was tired a while ago." Chiu Tong said worriedly, "Miss, it's good for you to rest like this, but you can't always sleep. This servant is very afraid. Let's listen to Zhang Xiaohua and see if he can find anything." Without waiting for Yan to nod, Zhang Xiaohua asked, "Big sister, when did you suddenly feel very tired and want to sleep?" Yan thought for a moment and said, "About 20 days ago. I wanted to go to the mountain to take a look, but halfway there, I suddenly felt a gust of wind. I felt cold all over, and my limbs were tired. I didn't want to move. At that time, I was with Chiu Tong, and it was Chiu Tong who helped me back. When I came back, I couldn't open my eyes and wanted to sleep. Then, do you feel any different when you sleep compared to when you rest?" "Yes," Yan said firmly. "Usually I just sleep, but this time it was as if I wasn't sleeping at all. I felt like I was flying, and it was as if I was chasing a flying bug. It kept flying and I kept chasing, but I couldn't catch up. It was very, very tiring. Was there anything else unusual?" Zhang Xiaohua asked. "There didn't seem to be anything. It was just a dream, nothing else." Zhang Xiaohua looked at Chiu Tong and said, "Big sister Chiu Tong, I don't have anything else to ask. You can tell young mistress." Chiu Tong nodded and looked at Yan. "It's all right, young mistress. Yesterday, we asked a doctor from Lingering Fragrance, Peak, to come over and leave you some pills. Once you take it, you'll wake up. Also, Zhang Xiaohua knows the Qi Huang technique. He said that he will definitely be able to cure your illness." "Huh," Yan laughed. She was also tired. She said, "I believe in you." Then she sighed and said, "Actually, this is good too. I've been tired these past few years. Whenever I have time, I think of Big Brother. If I can't wake up from my sleep, I can go and see Big Brother earlier. But I can't rebuild the Misty School. I'm afraid I won't be able to answer to Big Brother." "You're thinking too much. Didn't gang leader not tell you anything? Why are you giving yourself such a heavy task?" Chiu Tong reprimanded. "The Misty School is Big Brother's foundation. I can't accept it being taken over by someone else for no reason. Sigh, it's a pity that you had to come here with me. You're almost 30, but you don't even have a good husband." Chiu Tong blushed a little when she heard this. She rebuked, "Look at what young mistress is saying. Aren't you the same? This servant is still waiting to serve you, and at this moment, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly thought of something. He smiled and said, Big sister Qiu Tong, I forgot something. It wasn't just Qiu Tong. Even Oyen looked up and said, Look at you smiling so happily. What's the matter? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, It's good news for big sister Qiu Tong. With that, he took out the brocade box and the letter that Qiu Ju had asked him to bring to Qiu Tong. He said, Congratulations, big sister Qiu Tong. There's actually a disciple in the Misty School who admires you so much. This is the letter and birthday present he asked someone to bring to you. Qiu Tong's face turned red when she heard this. She scolded jokingly, Zhang Xiaohua, when did you learn to make fun of me? You actually brought something like this over? Oyen was also overjoyed. She tugged at Qiu Tong and said, You silly girl, when did you go to the front mountain? You actually did such a big thing without saying a word. You even hid it from me? See if I don't give you a dowry in the future. How can that be? Qiu Tong protested loudly. I've been accompanying young mistress every day. How can I have the time to go to the Misty Hall? Hearing their conversation, Zhang Xiaohua knew that they had misunderstood. She quickly said, Sisters, please listen to me. This disciple is not from the Misty Hall. Then Zhang Xiaohua told them everything that Qiu Ju had said. Oyen and Qiu Tong were both sad. They knew that this disciple was no longer around. After a while, Oyen asked, Qiu Tong, who do you think this disciple is? Qiu Tong shook her head and said, I've never had the chance to go to the Misty Mountain Villa. Even when I did go, it was to accompany young mistress. Although there are many disciples in the Misty School, I've never paid attention to them. Sigh, it's a pity that this disciple is too shy. If he had come a few years earlier, he might have been able to achieve something good. Young mistress, Qiu Tong said shyly, This is something that has never happened. What are you talking about? She then raised the letter and box in her hand and said, It's because this disciple sacrificed her life for the Misty School that I accepted these. If it were any other day, I wouldn't even look at them. At this time, seeing that Oyen was gradually becoming more and more sleepy, Zhang Xiaohua's consciousness felt that Oyen's vitality was fading away. She couldn't help but have a bad feeling. It seemed that this spirit-cleansing pill could only cure the symptoms. Oyen yawned and said, Let's take a look at the letter first. I'm curious, who is this disciple? Is it one of the few that I know? Qiu Tong's face turned red, but seeing that Oyen was about to fall asleep again, she was also anxious. She smiled and said, All right, young mistress, please wait a moment. I'll read the letter to you. Hearing this, Oyen's eyes lit up. She said, Then read it quickly. This disciple of the Misty School has some literary talent. Qiu Tong smiled and opened the letter, but when she saw the contents, she couldn't help but turn pale with fright. -3. Chapter 741. Qiu Tong's heart was pounding like a little deer. What girl didn't yearn for love? Qiu Tong was the same. It was just that she had not met anyone who could move her heart. But now, she suddenly heard that a disciple of the ethereal sect admired her a few years ago. He even wrote a confession letter and gave her a birthday present before her birthday. How could she not be overjoyed? Even her vanity, which was rarely seen, was swollen at this moment. Even Oyen, who was lying on the side, looked at her with envy and jealousy. After all, she had never received such a direct confession in all these years. However, when Qiu Tong opened the letter with trembling fingers, her face was full of surprise. Then she flipped through the letter and said, What is this? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. He scratched his head and thought to himself, Why? Did I take the wrong one? But then he thought about it. He had a lot of pills and herbs in his bag. If it was a letter, there was only one of it. How could he have taken the wrong one? Could it be that little Ewer secretly wrote it for me? Zhang Xiaohua was a little embarrassed. Let me see. Oyen said. Zhang Xiaohua naturally wanted to say the same, but this involved Qiu Tong's privacy. He didn't dare to say anything. Chiu Tong looked confused as she passed the item in her hand to Oyen. Oyen took it and looked it up and down. She said in confusion, Chiu Tong, this admirer of yours is quite interesting. Is this the place where he wants to meet you on a date? But, so what if he wants to meet you? Will it kill him to write a word? Why would he spend so much effort to draw a map? Also, you can draw it if you want. Why? Why didn't you draw it completely? It's just, oh, I think it's just a corner. As she said that, Oyen seemed to have thought of something. Suddenly, she raised her head in shock and looked straight at Chiu Tong. Chiu Tong also seemed to have realized something. Her eyes were filled with disbelief as she met Oyen's eyes. Quick, see what's in the box. Oyen said without hesitation. Okay. Chiu Tong quickly opened the box. However, he was flustered and nervous. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't open it. Zhang Xiaohua, who was standing at the side, saw that the two of them were acting mysteriously and did not find it strange. She stepped forward and said with a smile, Sister Chiu Tong, shall I help you? Only then did Chiu Tong and Oyen realize that Zhang Xiaohua was still in the room. They were slightly taken aback. Then they looked at each other and nodded slightly. Chiu Tong turned around and said, Zhang Xiaohua, I think you might have realized that this. Before she could finish, she tilted her head to look at Oyen and continued, I won't go into the details first. I'll tell you in detail later. Now, all you need to do is swear that you won't tell anyone what you saw today. Otherwise, Chiu Tong wouldn't be able to come up with anything that Zhang Xiaohua was afraid of. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua frowned and said warmly, Okay, Sister Chiu Tong. I definitely won't tell anyone what I saw today. If I violate this oath, I'll be struck by lightning and die. Chiu Tong heard Zhang Xiaohua's sincere oath and gradually calmed down. However, she still turned to look at Oyen. Oyen was a little listless and only nodded slightly. Thus, Chiu Tong handed the box to Zhang Xiaohua and said, Open it carefully. Don't be too surprised if there's anything special inside. Okay. Zhang Xiaohua took the brocade box and pretended to look at it. His divine sense had already been released. Then his finger moved lightly on the lid of the brocade box a few times. With a soft paw sound, the brocade box opened on its own. Zhang Xiaohua didn't even look at it and just handed it to Chiu Tong. Chiu Tong and Oyen were very satisfied with Zhang Xiaohua's actions. They looked at each other again before Chiu Tong took the box. When she saw what was inside the box, her eyes were filled with confusion. Then, without saying a word, she handed the box to Oyen. Oyen saw that Chiu Tong was confused and found it strange as well. Is there something special inside? However, when Oyen saw what was inside the box, her expression wasn't one of confusion, but one of excitement. Inside the brocade box was actually a small and exquisite jade bottle, and on the jade bottle were the words, Longevity Pill, scribbled on it. Who was Oyen? She was sect leader O's biological sister. Although she couldn't practice martial arts, she was doted on by sect leader Junhui and his wife from the Misty School. Her knowledge wasn't any worse than Openg's. In fact, because she didn't practice martial arts, she knew more than Openg. Since Openg knew about the origin of the longevity pill, how could Oyen not know? Oyen immediately knew why the Misty School was annihilated when she saw the longevity pill. With such a heaven-defying item in her hands, how could she not be coveted by others? Moreover, she immediately understood Openg's arrangement. To let a young Misty School disciple pretend to give this item to a servant girl as a gift. Even the incense cult wouldn't be able to find it. Who would have thought of this? But isn't this too risky? Oyen thought. If Chiu Tong didn't know and just left it on the table, wouldn't she be caught? Just as this thought appeared, Oyen laughed. As the saying goes, take the unconventional path. Big Brother must be thinking of this. If he can take the risk and give it to me, then so be it. If he can't, then so be it. Now that it's in my hands. Doesn't it mean that Big Brother's judgment is correct? Sigh, Big Brother. Then a wave of drowsiness washed over her. Yen forced herself to stay awake and forced herself to look at Chiu Tong and Zhang Xiaohua. In a flash, her heart skipped a beat. She pointed at Zhang Xiaohua and said, "You even let him take it!" As soon as she finished speaking, Yan's eyes closed and she fell into a deep sleep. So fast? Zhang Xiaohua was speechless as she watched. She muttered in her heart, "Could it be that Yen is like me and has something on her? Does she have to fall asleep on time at a certain time?" Yen fell into a deep sleep, and the brocade box in her hands fell onto the bed. Chiu Tong sighed and picked up the brocade box. She didn't close the box and handed it to Zhang Xiaohua. "Take a look. Since young mistress told you to keep it, wouldn't it be immoral if I didn't let you see it? Rather than letting you sneak a peek, I'd rather let you see it openly." Chiu Tong was so straightforward that she obviously didn't treat Zhang Xiaohua as an outsider. Zhang Xiaohua smiled awkwardly and took the brocade box. She pretended to look at it. Needless to say, everyone already knew that there was nothing within 10 feet that could be hidden from Zhang Xiaohua. After looking at it, Zhang Xiaohua asked hesitantly, "Big sister Chiu Tong, what is this longevity pill?" "I've never heard of it before." That's right. Zhang Xiaohua had taken many jade slips. Although there were many records of elixirs in these jade slips, there was no mention of this longevity pill. Chiu Tong was also at a loss. She only said, "How would I know? I'll ask young mistress the next time she wakes up." Then she handed over the letter in her hand and said, "Take a look at this too." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "This is big sister Chiu Tong's private matter. It's not good for me to look at it." Chiu Tong pursed her lips and said, "What private matter? Take a look first. I'll tell you later." Zhang Xiaohua didn't read Chiu Tong's letter with his divine sense. He took it from Chiu Tong's hands. As soon as he touched it, he felt that something was wrong. What kind of letter was this? Wasn't this just a sheepskin scroll? When she opened it again, she was even more surprised. There was something drawn on the sheepskin scroll that looked like a mountain peak. Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. She thought of the incident when she encountered the Xian Rong gang on the island. Didn't the red-clothed corpse have a similar piece of skin? Didn't it have the same drawing? Even the edges of the sheepskin scroll were the same. How could Zhang Xiaohua not understand now? This sheepskin scroll and the other sheepskin scroll she saw before were torn off from a complete map. When she compared the 2 sheepskin scrolls in her mind, she knew that this was 2 of them. There were 2 more that she hadn't seen before. However, just based on these 2 sheepskin scrolls, she seemed to have a rough idea of the shape of the mountain peak. After looking at it, Chiu Tong reminded her, "Zhang Xiaohua, young mistress has entrusted this to you. You must take good care of it. This concerns young mistress's life. Even if you lose your life, you can't lose these 2 things." Gosh, Zhang Xiaohua secretly laughed at Chiu Tong's nagging and how precious these 2 things were. Sigh. She's still treating me like the village child from before. However, he didn't refute her. He nodded and said, "Big sister Chiu Tong, don't worry." "Oh, that's right. How can you hide them so casually in your clothes? How about this? You should take off your underwear. I'll sew a pouch for you. It's most suitable for you to put them in there." "Ah!" Zhang Xiaohua was embarrassed. "You don't have to go that far, big sister Chiu Tong. I've carried these 2 things for so many years without any mishaps. It won't happen again in the future. You're doing this. It seems like you don't trust me at all." After thinking about it for a while, Chiu Tong also laughed. Zhang Xiaohua had kept it with him for so many years and had not lost it. He had even sent it over in perfect condition. She took a look at it and then asked him to keep it. That would cause so much distrust. It was really too much. Perhaps her brother should be more sensible. Chiu Tong was a little distracted. Then she smiled and said, "Don't blame me for talking too much. All right, keep these things properly first. I'll tell you the reason behind it. Perhaps you'll understand why I'm so serious about it." Zhang Xiaohua complied and kept the 2 items in her clothes. Then she smiled and said, "All right, as long as it's with me, even the best thief in the world won't be able to take it away." Don't say that I'm a thief from Pingyang City. Uft! Chiu Tong seemed to have recalled the past. She couldn't help but laugh and said, "You're still as talkative as before." Then she explained the importance of these two items to Zhang Xiaohua. -3.